She ran away to escape an arranged marriage, never knowing that fate would lead her into the arms of another man, hiding a secret of his own. 6 years later, she returns with a little girl and a life built on silence, only to discover that the stranger she once loved is now the powerful heir to the very family she fled. Some secrets protect the people we love, while others demand a price no heart is ready to pay. You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form. The bells of Santa Croce were still ringing when Giulia Ferretti realized she was going to be sick. Not from fear, though fear coiled in her stomach like a snake that had learned her name. Not from the corset that pinched her ribs, or the tiara that pressed into her scalp like a crown of thorns pretending to be diamonds. It was the certainty of it, the absolute, gilded certainty that in 11 minutes she would walk down an aisle lined with the most dangerous men in Palermo and give herself, body and name and blood, to a man she had spoken to exactly 4 times. Niccolò Barone, the heir, the future. Her future, they had all decided, without once asking her what she wanted. She stood in the bride's chamber of the old villa, a room of cream silk and gold leaf that smelled of lilies and expensive despair, and she looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was Valentino. The pearls had belonged to her grandmother, who had married her own captor and called it love because there had been no other word available to her. Giulia's mother stood behind her, adjusting the veil with hands that trembled only slightly. "You look like an angel," her mother whispered. "I look like a sacrifice," Giulia said. Her mother's fingers stilled. In the mirror, their eyes met, and for one raw instant, Giulia saw the truth her mother had spent 30 years burying beneath rosaries and good manners. "I know. I have always known, and I could not save you either." "Giulia," her mother's voice cracked, "it is done. Your father has given his word. To refuse now... To refuse now means what, Mama? A war? Blood in the streets? Papa's honor?" Giulia turned from the mirror, and the veil swung like a shroud. "And what of my blood? What of the child I will be expected to make with a stranger? Does honor sleep in my bed with me? Do not be vulgar. Do not be a coward," Giulia said, and immediately hated herself because her mother was not a coward. Her mother was a woman who had survived by becoming stone, and stone did not choose to be stone. It was carved that way by pressure it never consented to. From beyond the door came the murmur of 300 guests. The Barone, the Ferretti, the Rina cousins, and the Aiello uncles, and every capo who mattered from Palermo to Catania, gathered under the frescoed ceilings of the villa to witness 2 dynasties become one. Somewhere in that crowd stood her father, Don Vittorio Ferretti, pale beneath his silver hair, one hand pressed to a heart that had already begun its slow betrayal, though none of them knew yet how slow, or how it would one day summon her home. And somewhere out there stood Niccolò, in a suit worth more than most men earned in a year, waiting to receive her like a deed of property. Giulia looked at the window. It was a stupid thought, a child's thought. The window opened onto the eastern garden, and beyond the garden the olive groves, and beyond the groves, the coast road where, if she had planned this, which she absolutely had not, which she had only imagined the way one imagines flight during a fall, a car might be waiting. There was, in fact, a car. She had told no one. She had barely told herself. But 3 nights ago, she had pressed a fold of American dollars and a false passport into the hands of Enzo, the groundskeeper's son, who had once, at 19, tried to kiss her behind the lemon trees and been gently refused, and who had loved her hopelessly ever since. "If I come to the road," she had told him, "drive. Do not ask where, do not ask why, just drive." And Enzo, who understood that love sometimes meant becoming an accomplice to someone else's escape, had said only, "The old grey Fiat, behind the chapel wall, from noon." It was 11:52. "Mama," Giulia said, and her voice was very calm, the way water is calm before it goes over the edge. "I need a moment alone, to pray." Her mother searched her face. Whatever she saw there, the calm, the resolve, the terrible tenderness of a daughter memorizing her mother's features, she did not name it. She only nodded and touched Giulia's cheek with one cool hand and said, "You were always braver than me." Then she left, and she did not lock the door. Later, Giulia would understand that as a gift, the unlocked door. Her mother's final rebellion, small and silent and absolute. Giulia moved fast. The veil came off first, torn from its pins so hard that a lock of dark hair came with it. The train she gathered in both fists. She had worn her running shoes beneath the gown, another thing she had told herself meant nothing, and now she kicked off the satin heels and felt the cool tile through the canvas soles and thought wildly, "I am really doing this." The window latch was stiff. She broke a nail on it and did not feel it. Then it gave, and the Sicilian afternoon poured in, heat and cicadas and the green smell of the grove, and she was over the sill and into the garden, with her wedding dress bunched around her thighs, running. She ran through the roses. She ran past the fountain where cherubs spat water at an indifferent sky. She heard, distantly, a voice call her name, a guard perhaps, or God, and she did not stop. Her heart was a fist beating against the inside of her chest, and every beat said one word, over and over. Live, live, live. The chapel wall, the old grey Fiat, and Enzo, white-faced, the engine already running. "Signorina," he breathed as she wrenched the door open and threw herself across the seat. "Drive, Enzo. For the love of God, drive." He drove. The villa fell away behind them, the bells, the lilies, the 300 witnesses to a wedding that would not happen, the man in the expensive suit who would wait at the altar and then not wait, whose humiliation would harden overnight into something that wanted her dead. All of it shrank in the rear-view mirror and then was gone behind a curve of cypress, and there was only the coast road, blue on one side and gold on the other, and the wind screaming through the open window like something set free. Giulia laughed. It came out cracked and half a sob. Tears ran hot down her face, and she let them, because for the first time in her 22 years, no one was watching to see whether she wept correctly. She did not know then that she was already carrying the secret that would define the next 6 years of her life. She did not know it had begun, quietly, 3 months before, in a city of neon and salt air, under a name that was not her own, in the arms of a man she had believed was no one dangerous at all. She only knew she was free. She would learn in time that freedom is the most expensive thing a woman in her world could buy, and that the bill always, always came due. The alarm went off at 5:40, and Giulia Rossi, for that was the name she wore now, worn soft with use like a favourite coat, was already awake. She always woke before it. 6 years of single motherhood had rewired her body to surface from sleep at the first grey hint of dawn, listening for the small sounds of the apartment, the hum of the old refrigerator, the click of the AC, and best of all, the deep, even breathing of the child asleep in the next room. Sophia, 5 years old, going on 50. Dark curls exactly like her mother's, and eyes that were not her mother's at all, a strange, arresting grey-green, the colour of the sea before a storm. Giulia had spent 5 years telling herself those eyes belonged to no one in particular. She was a poor liar, even to herself. She rose, showered in 90 seconds of lukewarm water, and made coffee in the little kitchen of the apartment they rented above a Cuban bakery in Little Havana. It was small. It was hers. The rent ate most of what she made bartending 4 nights a week at a club on Collins Avenue, and the rest went to Sophia's daycare and to the coffee can hidden behind the flower where she kept her escape fund, the way other women kept savings. Because she had never stopped running. Not really. She had only slowed down enough to raise a child. "Mama!" A small, warm body collided with her legs. Sophia, in dinosaur pajamas, hair a glorious catastrophe. "I dreamed about the ocean, the one with the boats." "Yeah? Good boats or scary boats?" Sophia considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Good boats. One had a dog on it. A very lucky dog." Giulia crouched and gathered her daughter up, breathing in the sleep-warm smell of her, and something in her chest ached the way it always did, half joy, half terror. "I made you out of a lie, and you are the only true thing I have ever done." They had their morning the way they always did, toast with too much jam, Sophia narrating a complex dispute between 2 of her stuffed animals, Giulia braiding the wild curls into something that would survive an hour of daycare at most, and through it all, the low background hum of a life built carefully out of nothing. No photographs on the walls that could identify her, no social media, a phone registered under a name that did not exist, cash whenever possible. She had become very good at being no one. The city helped. Miami swallowed reinvention the way the ocean swallowed rain. Nobody asked where you came from. Everyone here was running from something. A marriage, a bankruptcy, a winter, a self they'd outgrown. A woman with a fake name and a beautiful child, and a wariness in her eyes was so common as to be invisible. She dropped Sophia at daycare with a kiss and the ritual promise, "I will always come back for you, always," and walked to the bus in the thickening heat and told herself, as she told herself every morning, that the past was a country she had emigrated from and would never visit again. She was wrong, of course, but she had 2 more weeks of not knowing it, and she spent them well. The club was called Velicor, which none of the patrons could pronounce, and none of them cared to. It occupied the ground floor and rooftop of a boutique hotel, and at night it filled with the particular Miami species of the beautiful and the moneyed and the pharmaceutically enhanced. Giulia worked the upstairs bar, where the drinks cost $40 and the tips were obscene, and she had learned to move through the crowd like a fish through water, present, useful, unmemorable. It was there, on a Thursday in late June, that the past sent its first messenger. She almost didn't notice him. He sat alone at the end of the bar, a man in a charcoal suit that had not come off any rack, drinking Sicilian Amaro. She knew the bottle. She was the only bartender who stocked it, a small private homesickness she permitted herself, and watching the room with the stillness of a man who was never truly off duty. Broad through the shoulders, grey at the temples, a face like a closed door. "Another?" she asked, when his glass was empty. He looked at her, and something in his eyes flickered. Recognition, quickly hidden, the way a man hides a card he's just been dealt. "Ferretti," he said quietly, in Italian. "You are Vittorio's girl." The floor did not open. The music did not stop. Giulia kept her hand steady on the bottle, kept her face pleasant and blank, and answered in the flat American English she had practiced in 1,000 mirrors. "I think you've got the wrong girl, honey. Name's Rossi." But he had already seen it. She watched the certainty settle into him. He was old, 60s maybe, with a scar through one eyebrow, and the heavy calm of a man who had buried people. She did not know his name, but she knew his kind. She had grown up surrounded by them. He did not press. He simply laid $100 bill on the bar, far too much, and stood and said in Italian so soft it barely crossed the space between them, "Your father is dying, Giulia. He is calling the family home. All of it." A pause. "You should decide how you want to be found, because you will be found. Better it is by someone who remembers you fondly." Then he was gone into the crowd, and Giulia stood with the $100 bill in her hand, and the whole carefully constructed architecture of her new life groaning under a sudden, monstrous weight. "Your father is dying." She had not spoken to Vittorio Ferretti in 6 years. She had let him believe, through silence, that she might be dead. She had told herself she hated him for the engagement, for the world he'd raised her in, for treating her like a bargaining chip in a game older than either of them. She had not known until this exact moment that she also, hopelessly, loved him. She got through the rest of her shift. She smiled and poured and made change, and when she got home at 3 in the morning and stood over her sleeping daughter, she understood, with the cold clarity of a woman who had run once and knew the shape of running, that the walls were closing in. They knew she was alive. They knew where she was. And whatever she did next, she would not get to do it as no one. She would have to go back as Giulia Ferretti. And she had no idea, none at all, that going back would put her face to face with the one man she had spent 6 years trying not to remember. She dreamed of him that night, which she had trained herself not to do. In the dream, it was 3 years before her wedding. No, that was wrong. Time in the dream was liquid. It was the winter she had spent in Nice at 19, the one season her father had permitted her a leash long enough to feel like freedom. She had been enrolled at a language school, chaperoned loosely by an aunt who preferred the casino to her duties, and for 4 impossible months Giulia Ferretti had been almost an ordinary girl. That was where she had met him. Not Niccolo, not the fiancé. She had not yet been promised then. The engagement came later, brokered when she was 21, a treaty between families dressed up as a match. No, the man in the dream had come before all of that, in the salt and neon dark of a coastal winter, and he had told her his name was Matteo. Just Matteo. No surname. She had not given hers either. That had been the whole intoxicating point. She had met him in a jazz bar off the Promenade des Anglais, where she had gone alone, defiantly, in a black dress she'd bought without permission. He had been at the piano, not playing, just leaning against it, watching the pianist with the concentration of a man who understood the difference between hearing music and listening to it. Dark hair, a jaw you could cut yourself on, eyes that grey-green colour she would one day see again, smaller and sleepier, in the face of her daughter. "You're not French," he'd said, in Italian, without turning around. "Neither are you," she'd said. No. He'd turned then and smiled, and the smile had done something criminal to her pulse. "But I'm pretending, aren't you? Everyone in Nice is pretending to be someone." "Then let's pretend together." He'd offered his hand. "Matteo." "Giulia," she'd said, her true name, the only true thing she gave him, because a first name alone was safe, was anonymous, was a girl and not a dynasty. "Just Giulia. Just Giulia." He'd tasted the words like wine. "I like a woman with only one name. It means she hasn't decided who to be yet." They had 4 months. 4 months of walking the winter beaches when the tourists were gone. 4 months of him teaching her to lose at cards and her teaching him that she cheated better than he did. He was older than her, not by much, perhaps 6 years, and there was a darkness in him she recognised and did not examine, because she had grown up in a house full of dangerous men, and she knew the smell of one, and she had decided, recklessly, gloriously, not to care. He never spoke of his family. Neither did she. They existed in a bubble of the present tense, 2 people with no past and, they both silently understood, no future. He was gentle with her, in a way that undid her precisely because he was so clearly not a gentle man. She saw how the waiters flinched when he was displeased. She saw the way his eyes went flat and cold when a drunk tourist grabbed her wrist one night, and how the tourist was gone within the minute, escorted out by men she hadn't noticed were his. He had a power he wore lightly, and it should have frightened her, and instead it made her feel, for the first time in her life, safe. Chosen. Fiercely, absolutely protected. The night before she left Nice, her aunt summoned home, the leash reeled in. They had spent together. All of it. And in the grey before dawn, he had held her face in both his hands and said something she had turned over 10,000 times in the 6 years since. "If I could burn my whole life down and start again as no one," he'd said, "I would do it tonight, for you. But I can't. There are people who depend on me. Blood I can't spill just by wishing." His thumb had traced her cheekbone. "You have that look too, you know. Like you're carrying a name that's too heavy for you." "Maybe I am." "Then run from it. If you ever get the chance, run. Don't be like me." He'd kissed her forehead. "Don't let them make you into what they need." She had left that morning without waking him. It had felt like mercy. She had gone home to Sicily and been engaged within the year to Niccolo Barone, and she had told herself Matteo was a beautiful dream she'd had in the winter, a boy with no last name, no way to find, no way to keep. And then, 6 weeks after Nice, back in Palermo, sick every morning and terrified, she had learned the winter had left her something. She had told no one. She had let everyone assume, when it eventually mattered, whatever they assumed. And she had run from her wedding not only because she would not be sold to Niccolo Barone, but because she was already, secretly, 3 months along with another man's child. And to stay would have been to die. Sophia, her storm-eyed girl, Matteo's daughter. Giulia woke with wet cheeks in the grey Miami dawn, and she lay very still, and she let herself remember him for exactly 60 seconds, which was the ration she permitted. His hands, his voice. Don't let them make you into what they need. I didn't, Matteo, she whispered to the ceiling. I ran, like you told me. She had never found out who he was. In 6 years she had resisted, mostly, the temptation to search, because searching left tracks, and tracks got people killed. She had a first name and a face and a daughter, and she had decided that was all she would ever have. She had no way of knowing that the man who had told her to run, the man whose eyes their daughter wore, had spent those same 6 years searching for her, and that he had risen, in her absence, to become the most feared man in the very family she had fled. She had no way of knowing that Matteo had a surname after all, that the surname was Barone, and that the summons pulling her home was pulling her straight into his arms. The letter came on a Tuesday, in an envelope so heavy and cream-coloured it looked like an accusation. It had not come through the mail. Giulia found it slid under her door when she came home from the bakery downstairs, one arm full of pastelitos and the other holding Sophia's small, sticky hand. No stamp, no return address, just her name, her real name, written across the front in a hand she did not recognize, the letters slanted and confident. Giulia Ferretti. She stopped so abruptly that Sophia bumped into her legs. "Mama, you squished the guava one." "Sorry, baby. Go put on cartoons. I'll cut them up in a minute." Her voice came out almost normal. She was proud of that later, when she remembered it, that even with the floor dropping out from under her, she'd kept her voice normal for her child. She waited until the cartoon music started, until Sophia was safely absorbed, before she picked the envelope up off the floor. Her hands were not steady. She thought of the old man at the bar. You should decide how you want to be found. And she understood that the decision had been taken away from her. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph and a first-class plane ticket. The photograph was of her father. She had to sit down. She lowered herself onto the arm of the sofa and stared at the image of Don Vittorio Ferretti, and she almost did not recognize him. The man who had ruled her childhood like a small, cold god, broad, upright, silver-maned, terrifying, had become an old man in a hospital bed. His cheeks had fallen in. There were tubes. His hand, which she had watched sign death warrants without a tremor, lay open and empty on a white blanket. Someone had photographed him sleeping, or perhaps only resting, and the cruelty of it and the tenderness of it were the same thing. The letter was short. It was written in Italian. Giulia, your father does not know I am sending this. He would forbid it out of pride, and pride is the only thing he has left that still works. But he is dying. The doctors give him weeks. Before he goes, he intends to name his successor and set the family's affairs in order. And he has asked, only once, only to me in the middle of the night when he thought no one heard, for his daughter. I have kept your secret for 6 years, cara. I have told them nothing. Not where you went, not why, not what you carried with you. Come home and say goodbye to your father, and I will keep it still. Come home, Giulia, before there is nothing left to come home to. Your mother. Giulia read it 3 times. On the 3rd reading, the words blurred, and she realized she was crying, silently, the way she had taught herself to cry in 6 years of not being able to afford to fall apart. Her mother, who had left the door unlocked, who had known all along and said nothing, who had let her father believe his daughter might be dead rather than betray where she'd gone. Giulia had spent 6 years thinking of her mother as stone, and the stone, it turned out, had been standing between her and the wolves this whole time. I have kept your secret for 6 years. Which meant her mother knew about Sophia, had always known. The child changed everything. It was proof of a lover before the wedding, proof that Giulia had not merely fled an obligation, but had been unfaithful to the entire arrangement before it began. In their world, that was not a scandal. That was a death sentence, dressed up in the language of honour. And her mother had swallowed it and kept it locked behind her teeth for 6 years. The plane ticket was for Friday, Palermo via Rome, 1st class, 1 passenger. They had not sent a ticket for a child, which meant, Giulia understood with a chill, that they either did not know Sophia existed, impossible if her mother knew, or that her mother had been careful, even here, to write nothing down that another set of eyes might read. 1 passenger, come alone, leave the girl, protect the girl. Giulia sat with the letter and the ticket and the photograph until the cartoons ended and Sophia wandered back in, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Mama, why are you sad?" Giulia wiped her face fast. "I'm not sad, tesoro. I got a letter from someone I love very much." "Then why crying?" "Sometimes people cry because they love someone. It's a grown-up thing. It doesn't hurt." She pulled her daughter into her lap and pressed her lips to the wild curls and breathed. "Sophia, if Mama had to go on a trip, a short one, for a few days, and you stayed with Rosa downstairs, the one who makes the coconut cookies, would that be okay?" Sophia pulled back and studied her mother with those storm-coloured eyes, and Giulia's heart turned over because it was his look, the exact weighing, considering, seeing too much look that Matteo had turned on her across a piano in Nice. "Will you come back?" "Always. I will always come back for you. That is the truest thing in the whole world." "What do I always say?" "I will always come back for you. Always," Sophia recited, and then, satisfied, added, "Can I have 2 coconut cookies at Rosa's?" "You can have 3. 4. "You drive a hard bargain, Ferretti," Giulia said, and then caught herself, because she never used that name, never, and here it was, slipping out of her the moment the past reached into her apartment. She held her daughter tighter. 4 cookies. A short trip. A goodbye to a dying father. In and out, no one the wiser, and back to Miami before Sophia had finished the cookies. That was the plan. It was a good plan. It was the plan of a woman who had been away from her world for 6 years, and had forgotten one essential rule of it, the rule her father used to recite like a rosary. No one who is called home returns unchanged, and no one who returns leaves again the same person, if they leave at all. She spent Wednesday and Thursday making arrangements. She told the club she had a family emergency. She left Rosa an envelope of cash and a list of Sophia's foods and fears and comforts. And Rosa, who was 70 and had raised 9 children and asked no questions, only crossed herself and promised to guard the girl like her own. Giulia did not tell Rosa her real name. She did not tell anyone. She packed a single small bag and she left the coffee can escape fund exactly where it was, because part of her already knew she might need to run again and run faster. On Friday morning at the airport, she held Sophia so long that the child squirmed. "I love you more than the whole ocean," Giulia said, "even the part with the boats." "Even the dog boat?" "Especially the dog boat." Then she handed her daughter to Rosa, and she walked through security without looking back, because if she looked back, she would not go, and if she did not go, her father would die without his daughter's hand in his, and she had already forgiven him, she realized, somewhere over the last 2 days. Forgiven him without deciding to, the way you forgive the dead. She boarded the plane as Giulia Ferretti for the first time in 6 years. She had no idea she was flying toward the man whose eyes she kissed goodnight every evening on the face of their child. Sicily received her the way the sea receives a swimmer who has been gone too long, coldly at first, then all at once closing over her head. The heat hit her on the jet bridge, thick and golden, and smelling of the specific dust of the island, and something in her chest cracked open that she had kept sealed for 6 years. Home. She hated that it still felt like that. She had spent 6 years teaching her body that home was a 5th-floor walk-up in Little Havana, and her body had learned it. And now one breath of Sicilian air had undone the whole lesson. A man in a dark suit was waiting past customs with a card that read Rossi, which was a courtesy. They knew both her names now, and they were telling her so. He did not smile. He took her bag. He led her to a black Mercedes with tinted windows, and she got in the back and watched Palermo unspool past the glass. The crumbling Baroque facades, the laundry strung between balconies, the scooters, the palm trees, the sudden violent blue of the sea between buildings. Her city, not hers any more. Both. "Where is my father?" she asked in Italian. "The villa, signorina. He wished to die at home, not in the hospital." The driver's eyes found hers in the mirror. "He does not know you are coming. Your mother thought it best. A shock could—" He didn't finish. "How long?" "Days, perhaps a week." A pause. "It is good you came. He has been asking for you. In his sleep, mostly. He does not know he asks." Giulia turned her face to the window so the driver would not see it break. The villa rose up out of the olive groves exactly as it had 6 years before, the last time she'd seen it out a rear window while running in a wedding dress. The great iron gates, the gravel drive, the cypresses standing sentinel, and the men. She counted 6 before they'd even reached the door, more than she remembered, positioned with a care that told her something had changed in the family's fortunes or its fears. There were more guns here than there had been. Someone was expecting trouble. Her mother met her at the door. Maria Ferretti had aged 10 years in 6. The dark hair had gone fully silver. But she stood as straight as ever, and when she saw her daughter she did not cry out, did not run. She simply pressed one hand to her own mouth, and her eyes filled, and she opened her arms, and Giulia walked into them, and was, for the first time in 6 years, held by someone who had known her before she was no one. "My girl," Maria whispered into her hair, "my brave, stupid, brave girl. You came. You kept my secret. I would keep it into my grave." Maria pulled back, held her daughter's face, searched it. "And the child? She is safe, in America, with a good woman. I wouldn't bring her here, not into this. No." Maria's jaw set. "No, you were right. She must never come here. Do you understand me, Giulia? Whatever happens in this house in the coming days, that child must never be spoken of. Not to your father, not to anyone. There are those who would use her." Her grip tightened. "There are those who would take her to control you, or to control—" She stopped. To control who? But her mother only shook her head and drew her inside, into the cool, dim marble of the house Giulia had grown up in, and the smell of it, beeswax and old incense and lilies, always lilies, rose up and took her by the throat. Her father was in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, in the great carved bed where he had been born, and where, it was now clear, he intended to die. Giulia stood in the doorway and could not make her feet move. He was so small. That was the thing that undid her. Don Vittorio Ferretti, who had filled every room he ever entered, who had made grown men sweat with a lifted eyebrow, had shrunk into the pillows like something the tide had left behind. His eyes were closed, his breath rattled. A nurse sat in the corner, discreet as furniture. Giulia crossed the room and knelt by the bed and took his hand. The hand that had signed death warrants, that had struck her once, that had also, she remembered suddenly and treacherously, taught her to ride a bicycle in this same drive, running alongside her, laughing, "I have you, Piccolina, I have you, I won't let you fall." And she pressed it to her cheek. His eyes opened, cloudy, then focusing, finding her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his cracked lips moved. "Giulia." A breath, no more. "I dreamed you. Every night I dreamed you came home." His fingers moved weakly against her face. "Are you a dream?" "No, Papa." She was weeping openly now and didn't care. "I'm here. I'm really here." "You ran." Not an accusation, a wonder. "You ran from the wedding. I was so angry. For years I was so angry." His eyes drifted, came back. "And then I got old, and I thought she was the only one of us who was ever free, my daughter, the only free Ferretti." A terrible smile. "Forgive me, Piccolina, for selling you. I thought it was strength. It was only fear." "There's nothing to forgive." A lie. There was everything to forgive. She forgave it anyway. Both things were true. "There is." His hand fell from her face. His eyes closed, and for one horrible second she thought he had gone. But the rattling breath continued. There is much to forgive, and there is much you do not know about what I did, about the arrangements I made, about who I have chosen. His voice was fading into sleep, or something deeper. Tomorrow, when they are all here, I will tell you tomorrow. The successor, the one who will protect the family when I am... He slept. Giulia knelt by the bed a long time, holding his hand, listening to him breathe. She did not yet know that the one who will protect the family was not the man she had jilted. She did not know that Niccolo Barone was dead, had been dead for 2 years, and that his cousin, a man who had come from nowhere and risen through blood and brilliance to become the most feared enforcer in Sicily, had taken his place at the head of the Barone line. She did not know that this man had spent 6 years and a fortune searching for a girl named Giulia, who had vanished from Nice one winter morning. She did not know that he was, at that very moment, being driven through the same iron gates she had passed through an hour before. She did not know his name was Matteo Barone, but she was about to. The whole family arrived the next day, and the villa filled with the low, dangerous music of power gathering, the crunch of car tires on gravel, the murmur of men who did not raise their voices because they had never needed to, the click of expensive heels on marble. Giulia moved through it like a ghost at her own funeral. They knew her, the aunts, the cousins, the capos who'd watched her grow up. She saw the recognition, the calculation, the swift reappraisal, the runaway returns. Some looked at her with pity, some with contempt. A few of the older women embraced her and wept, and a few of the men would not meet her eyes, and all of them, she understood, were wondering the same thing: what her return meant for the succession. Because a dying Don with an estranged daughter was a variable, and their world hated variables. She wore black. Not mourning, her father still breathed, but the black of a woman who wished to be armour. She had asked her mother the night before the question that mattered. Who is he going to name? Is it Niccolo? And her mother had gone very still and said, Niccolo is dead, Giulia. 2 years now. A war with the Neapolitans. You didn't know. She hadn't known. She'd felt, to her shame, mostly relief. The man she'd fled was gone, could no longer hate her, could no longer hunt her. Then who leads the Barone now? And her mother had looked at her strangely, a look Giulia would understand only later, and said, his cousin, a man who came up from nothing. They call him Il Silenzio, the silence, because of how quietly he kills. Your father made a pact with him, an alliance. He is the strongest man in Sicily now, cara, stronger than your father ever was. A pause. You will meet him today. He is coming to hear the succession. The 2 families are to be joined, still. That was always the price of peace. Joined how? But the aunts had come then, and the question had gone unanswered, and Giulia had lain awake half the night with a formless dread, not knowing that the dread had a face she had kissed 6 years ago in the dark. Now it was afternoon, and the family had gathered in the great salon, The frescoed room where her wedding was to have taken place, she realized with a lurch, and her father had been carried down in a wheeled chair, wrapped in blankets despite the heat, propped up like a king, determined to hold court one last time. The nurse hovered. Giulia stood beside her mother near the tall windows. The room was full. Everyone was waiting. And then the doors opened, and he walked in, and Giulia Ferretti's entire life came apart in the space of a single heartbeat. She knew him before her mind would let her know him. Her body knew first, the way it went hot and then cold, the way her breath simply stopped, the way her hand found the windowsill and gripped it. 6 years older, harder. The grey at the temples was new, and the flat, cold stillness in him had deepened into something absolute, something that made the dangerous men in the room straighten and quiet like schoolboys. He wore black, like she did, but on him it was not armour, it was skin. He moved through the room, and the room bent around him. Matteo. Her Matteo, the man from Nice, the man with no last name, the father of her child, who did not know he was a father, who thought, if he thought of her at all, that she was a girl named Giulia, who had loved him one winter and vanished. The successor, il silenzio, the strongest man in Sicily. The floor tilted. She heard distantly her mother say her name. She heard closer the blood roaring in her own ears. And then Matteo Barone's eyes swept the room the way a searchlight sweeps a wall, assessing, cataloguing, dismissing, and reached the window where she stood, and stopped. She watched it happen to him. She watched the impossible register in a face that she would have sworn had forgotten how to register anything. The flat, cold stillness cracked, just for an instant, just for her. She saw the boy from the piano surface for one drowning second in the eyes of the killer he'd become. And his lips parted, and he said one word so quietly that only she and perhaps her mother heard it. One word that dropped into the silence of the room like a stone into a well. Giulia. Not Ferretti, not Signorina, not the runaway, the variable, the daughter of the dying Don. Giulia. Just Giulia. The name she had given him in Nice. The only name that had ever been true between them. The whole room felt it, the shift, the charge, though none of them understood it. They saw the new Barone Heir look at the returned Ferretti daughter and go still. And they read it as recognition of an enemy, or a rival, or a piece on the board. They did not see two lovers recognizing each other across 6 years and a chasm of lies. Her father's voice, thin and reedy, broke the spell. Ah, Matteo. Good. You are here. Don Vittorio lifted one trembling hand. Come, both of you, my daughter and my heir. Come stand where I can see you together. My heir. The word landed on Giulia like a blow. She could not move. She saw Matteo Barone, il silenzio, the man who had held her in the winter dark and told her to run, cross the room toward her father and toward her, his eyes never leaving her face, and she saw the questions detonating behind them. You are her. The girl from Nice is the Ferretti daughter. You are Vittorio's blood. You are the one I've been searching for. You are the bride who ran." He stopped an arm's length from her, close enough that she could smell him. Cedar and smoke, exactly as she remembered, and the memory of it nearly took her knees. "Signorina Ferretti," he said, and his voice was ice now, controlled, performing for the room, but his eyes were on fire. "We have not been introduced." "No," she managed. "We haven't." Behind them, her father was speaking to the assembled family, his voice gathering strength from somewhere, saying the thing that would cage them both. "I name Matteo Barone my successor, and to bind the families in blood, not merely in words," a rattling breath. "He will take my daughter to wife, as was always intended, as the peace requires." The room murmured its approval, the alliance restored, the bride returned, the order of things repaired. And Giulia Ferretti stood a foot from the father of her secret child, the child with his exact eyes, 4,000 miles away, eating coconut cookies at Rosa's, and understood that she had run all the way around the world and straight back into the arms she'd been running toward the whole time. He came for her that night. She had known he would. Through the endless evening, the family dinner she could barely sit through, the toasts to the succession, the sidelong appraising looks, her father carried back to his bed, exhausted and triumphant. She had felt Matteo's attention on her, like a hand at her spine. He had not spoken to her again. He had not needed to. When the party finally thinned toward midnight, and Giulia slipped away to the small study off the library where she used to hide as a girl, she was not surprised, 30 seconds later, to hear the door close behind her and the lock turn. She turned around. He stood with his back against the door. He had shed the jacket. His shirt was open at the throat, sleeves pushed up his forearms, and in the low lamplight the killer's stillness had burned off entirely, and what was left was raw. "6 years," he said, quietly, dangerously. "I looked for you for 6 years. Matteo, you told me your name was Giulia. Just Giulia." He pushed off the door and took a step toward her, and she made herself hold her ground. "I spent a fortune, do you understand me? I turned over half of Europe. A girl named Giulia, dark hair, cheated at cards, disappeared from Nice one morning without a word. I had men in 3 countries, and the whole time—" His voice cracked, and the crack was worse than the coldness. "The whole time you were Ferretti, Vittorio's daughter. You were the bride I heard about, the girl who ran from Niccolo's wedding, the great scandal, the disgrace of 2 families. I heard that story 100 times, and never once did I think it was you." "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "I never told you my name, and you never told me yours. That was the whole point. Yes." He was close now, close enough to touch. He didn't touch her. We were no one. That was the game. You were just Giulia, and I was just Matteo, and we were free of all of it for 4 months, in the dark. His eyes moved over her face like he was checking it against a memory, finding it changed, finding it the same. "And then you were gone. And I told myself it was mercy, that you'd done the right thing, that whoever you were running from, you'd gotten away." A terrible laugh. And instead, you ran straight into a wedding with my own cousin. I didn't know he was your cousin. I didn't know anything about you. You made sure of that. So did you. They stood glaring at each other, 6 years of silence between them, and the air was so thick she could hardly breathe it. She could see his pulse in his throat. She could see that he wanted to touch her and was holding himself back with everything he had, and the effort of it was shaking him. This man who feared nothing, and it terrified her how much she wanted him to lose the fight. "Why did you run from the wedding, Giulia?" he asked, softer now. "Not the family, not the arrangement. You. Why did you run?" And there it was, the question with the answer that would end her, because the true answer was, I ran because I was carrying your child, and to stay would have exposed me, and to expose me would have gotten us both killed. The true answer was standing 4,000 miles away in dinosaur pajamas. She could not tell him. She had planned to be gone from Sicily before she ever had to. She had not planned for this, for Matteo to be the heir, for the man she'd fled and the man she'd loved to collapse into one impossible person, for her father to hand her to him in marriage before the whole family. I ran because I didn't want to be sold, she said. It was true. It was not the whole truth. You, of all people, should understand. You told me to run, Matteo. That last morning, you said, don't let them make you into what they need. So I didn't. I ran. Something moved across his face, memory and pain, and something that might have been pride. I did say that. He was very close. His hand rose slowly, and this time he did touch her. One finger, tracing the line of her jaw exactly the way he had in Nice, and the 6 years fell away, and she was 19 and undone. And you listened. God help me. You're the only person who ever listened to me and did the brave thing. His voice dropped to almost nothing. And now, your father has given you back to me, as if you were mine to be given, as if I ever stopped. Don't, she breathed. Matteo, don't. It's not that simple. Everything is different now. You don't know. There are things you don't know. Then tell me. I can't. Tell me, he said, and his hand slid into her hair, and his forehead came down against hers, and they were breathing the same breath, and every rational thing in her was screaming to pull away, and every other thing in her was already lost. Whatever it is, whatever you're afraid of, I have more power now than any man in Sicily. There is nothing I cannot protect you from. Nothing. Do you understand? 6 years I looked for you, and now you're standing in front of me, and I am not letting you disappear again. The possessiveness in it should have frightened her. It did frighten her. It also lit something in her that had been dark for 6 years. You can't own me, Matteo. I don't want to own you. His mouth was a breath from hers. I want to keep you. There's a difference. One day I'll teach it to you. And then, low and rough and absolutely certain, I loved you before I knew your name, Giulia Ferretti. That's the truest thing I've ever said. And I am not going to marry you because your father commands it. I'm going to marry you because I have spent 6 years being only half a man, and I just found the other half, and I would burn this whole island down before I let it go again. She should have stepped back. She meant to step back. Instead, she kissed him. 6 years dissolved. His arms came around her like the closing of a door, and he kissed her like a man drinking after a drought, and she gripped his shirt and pulled him closer and hated herself and did not stop. Because she had loved him in the dark, under a false name, and she loved him now in the light, with all the terrible truth between them. And love, it turned out, did not care in the slightest that it was going to destroy her. When they finally broke apart, both of them shaking, he pressed his lips to her forehead and held her there, and she stared over his shoulder at the shelves of her father's books and thought one clear, cold thought through the fog of wanting him. He has a daughter, and I have to keep her from him until I know, until I'm certain what he'll do when he finds out I hid her. Because a man who would burn an island down to keep her was a man who would burn it down twice as hot when he learned what she had kept from him for 6 years. She barely slept. She lay in her childhood bedroom, in the narrow bed she'd left as a girl, and stared at the ceiling where a water stain had spread into a new continent in her absence, and she turned the impossible situation over and over like a stone in her hand, looking for the edge that would cut her free. She could not marry him. She could not marry him. Her father had declared it before the family, and to refuse now, publicly, would be to shatter the alliance, to shame both houses, to reignite the very war that had killed Niccolo. Men would die. Her father would die, knowing his last act had failed. And Matteo, il silenzio, the man who did not lose, would be humiliated in front of every capo in Sicily, and a humiliated, dangerous man was the most dangerous thing of all. And beneath the impossibility of the marriage lay the deeper, worse thing. Sophia. If she married Matteo, she brought him into her life permanently, root and branch, and a husband would want to know where his wife disappeared to for 6 years. A husband would eventually learn there was a child in Miami. A husband with Matteo's resources would learn it in a week. And then he would count backward. He would count the months, as she had counted them, in a bathroom in Palermo 6 years ago, with shaking hands. He would look at Sophia's storm-coloured eyes, his eyes, and he would know. And in the same instant he learned he had a daughter, he would learn that Giulia had known for 6 years and told him nothing, had let him search half of Europe, had let him become only half a man by his own account, while raising his child under a false name 4,000 miles away. She did not know what he would do. That was the unbearable part. She knew what he had been, gentle in Nice, gentle in a way that had felt like a secret between them. But she also now knew what he had become. A man they called the Silence. A man who killed so quietly the dangerous straightened when he entered a room. 6 years have made him into exactly the thing he'd once begged her to help him not become. Don't let them make you into what they need. No one had run away with him, no one had saved him, and so they had made him into what they needed. And what they needed was a monster with beautiful manners. Would that man forgive her? Or would that man take her child and cut her out of both their lives, and be within his rights by the brutal law of their world to do exactly that? A father in their world owned his blood. A son of the Barone line, and Sophia, God, Sophia was Barone blood, was the heir's heir, was worth more than Giulia had ever let herself understand. A Barone child belonged to the family absolutely. If Matteo wanted to take Sophia and raise her in Sicily and forbid Giulia to see her, he could. If the family decided Giulia was a liability, a woman who had lied to the Don for 6 years and stolen the heir's daughter, they could remove her, quietly. And no one would ever ask where the American bartender named Rossi had gone. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. The safest thing, the only safe thing, was to say nothing. Marry him if she had to, keep Sophia hidden, get back to Miami somehow, extract herself, vanish again with the child. Run. It was what she was good at. It was the only thing she was good at. But she had kissed him in the study. And in that kiss she had felt, treacherously, the thing she'd spent 6 years pretending was a beautiful dream. That she loved him. Not the memory of him. Him. The man downstairs with grey at his temples and blood on his hands, who had spent 6 years and a fortune trying to find a girl with one name. You could not build a life on a kiss and a lie. She knew that. She had learned it the hard way, in a hospital bathroom, at 22. Toward dawn, there was a soft knock. She sat up, heart hammering. Matteo? But it was her mother, in a dressing gown, carrying 2 cups of the bitter espresso she'd made every morning of Giulia's childhood. Maria sat on the edge of the bed and handed her a cup and studied her daughter's ruined face. "You knew him," Maria said. Not a question. "Before. You knew Matteo Barone before yesterday." Giulia's hand shook. Coffee slopped over the rim. "How?" "I watched him look at you." Her mother's eyes were ancient and knowing. "A man does not look at a stranger like that. And I watched you look at him." A pause. "Sicily is small, cara, and love is loud even when it whispers. Where? When?" "Nice," Giulia whispered. 6 years ago, before the engagement. I didn't know who he was. He said his name was Matteo, just Matteo, and I said Giulia, just Giulia. We never—" Her throat closed. "We never told each other. That was the whole point of it, to be no one. And then I came home, and Papa arranged the marriage to Niccolo, and I found out I was—" She stopped. Her mother finished it, very softly. "You found out you were carrying Matteo's child, not Niccolo's, not anyone's you were promised to." Maria closed her eyes. "That is why you ran. Not just the wedding, the child. If they had known you were with child by a man who was not your betrothed, they would have killed me, or made me get rid of her, or married me off faster and passed her as Niccolo's, and I would have spent my whole life lying about who my own daughter was." Giulia was crying again, silent and exhausted. "So I ran, and I had her alone, and I named her Sophia. And she has his eyes, Mama. She has his exact eyes. If he ever sees her, he will know." Maria's voice was iron. "In one look he will know, as I would have known if I'd ever seen her." She set down her cup and took her daughter's face in both hands, exactly as Giulia held Sophia's face. The gesture passed down like a family curse or a family blessing. "Listen to me, Giulia. Listen carefully, because I have lived in this world 60 years, and you have been away 6, and you have forgotten how it breathes." "Mama, he must not find out, not yet. Not until you know what kind of man he has become. A man who loves you is not the same as a man who will forgive you. And a man of the Barone line who learns his daughter has been hidden from him for 6 years. She shook her head, and for the first time Giulia saw fear in her mother's eyes, real fear. That is a man who might do anything. Take the child, cast you out, or worse, and I have seen worse, cara. I have washed the blood of worse out of these floors. Her thumbs wiped Giulia's tears. Say nothing. Marry him if the family demands it. Buy time, and watch him. Watch what he does when he thinks no one is looking. That is where the truth of a man lives. And when you know, only when you know, you decide whether to trust him with your daughter's life. Do you understand me? Giulia understood. It was cold, and it was calculating, and it was the only survivable path, and it was going to cost her something she could not yet name. Yes, Mama, she whispered. Good. Her mother kissed her forehead, over the place Matteo had kissed the night before, as if to seal it. Now drink your coffee, and put on your armour. You are a Ferretti. We do not let them see us bleed. The days that followed had the texture of a beautiful nightmare. By the family's logic, there was to be a courtship, brief, for the Don was dying and the wedding could not wait, but a courtship nonetheless, a public performance of the union to reassure every watching couple that the alliance was real and willing. And so Matteo came to the villa each day, and each day Giulia was expected to walk with him in the gardens, to sit with him at dinner, to be seen with him, to perform the role of the willing bride. It was torture. It was also the most alive she had felt in 6 years, and she hated herself for the second thing more than she feared the first. He was different in daylight, in company. The cold air, il silenzio, all economy of movement and quiet menace. But when they were alone in the olive groves, out of earshot of the men who trailed them at a discreet distance, the ice came off him in pieces, and the man from Nice looked out through the killer's eyes, and it wrecked her every time. "You're afraid of me," he said, the third day as they walked between the silver trees. "You keep looking at my hands. I know what your hands have done. They tell stories about you. Il silenzio. Do they frighten you? They should. But—" She stopped walking. "But I remember these hands teaching me to shuffle a deck. I remember them—" She stopped. "I remember them on me. I remember what they made. I remember them being gentle, and I don't understand how the same hands do both." He was quiet a long moment. The cicadas screamed in the heat. "When you left Nice," he said, "something in me closed. I told myself it was for the best. You were free, you were safe, you'd done the brave thing. But a part of me went dark and never came back on." He looked at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. Niccolo died 2 years later. The family was leaderless, weak, being eaten alive by the Neapolitans. I stepped in. I was good at it. I was good at it because I had stopped. He searched for the word. Feeling. It's easy to do terrible things when you've already decided nothing matters. I let them make me into what they needed, the exact thing I told you to run from. A bitter smile. You ran. I stayed. And I became the silence. The honesty of it undid her. Matteo. And then you walked into that salon, he went on, low, and everything that had been dark for 6 years came back on all at once. It hurt. Do you understand? It physically hurt to feel again. I'd forgotten I could. His eyes came up and pinned her. So yes, my hands have done terrible things, and they will do more, because that is the world your father is leaving me. But they have never, and will never, hurt you. That I can promise you on whatever's left of my soul. You are the only thing I've found in 6 years worth being gentle for. She should not have kissed him again. She did, anyway. She was made of the same weakness as her grandmother, she thought. The women in her family loved dangerous men and called it fate. But when Matteo kissed her back, one hand cradling her skull like something precious, and the other pressed to the small of her back like a claim, she felt the lie in her chest like a stone, and she thought, "He is telling me the truth, and I am lying to him with my whole body, and one of us is going to break the other." The jealousy came on the 4th day. There was a dinner, the extended family, the allied capos, a show of strength. And a man was there whom Giulia had known as a girl. Raffaele Aiello, a cousin of a cousin, handsome and charming, and precisely the kind of man who did not understand the difference between confidence and stupidity. He had been half in love with her at 16, and 6 years and a return from the dead had only sharpened his interest. He monopolized her at the dinner. He put his hand on her arm. He leaned in to murmur something about how Sicily had been dull without her, how the runaway bride was even more beautiful than the legend. And Giulia, who had spent 6 years fending off exactly this kind of man across a bar, handled it with practiced ease. She felt the temperature of the room change before she understood why. She looked up. Matteo was watching from across the table, and he had gone absolutely still. The specific stillness she was learning to read, the stillness of a predator that has decided. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand abruptly. He simply set down his wine and rose and crossed the room, and every conversation died in his wake, and by the time he reached them, Raffaele Aiello had gone the colour of ash. "Raffaele," Matteo said pleasantly, "you have your hand on my wife." "She's not... the wedding isn't... You have your hand," Matteo repeated, softer, "on my wife." He did not touch the man. He didn't have to. "Take it off. Then take yourself to the far end of the table. Then, in the morning, take yourself back to Catania and think very carefully about the difference between a man you can charm and a man you cannot." He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "I am the second kind, Raphael. Are we clear?" Raphael removed his hand. Raphael went to the far end of the table. Raphael left for Catania before breakfast. And Giulia sat with her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear, watching this man mark her as his in front of the whole family. And she was appalled at how much of her wanted it. 6 years of being no one, of belonging to nothing but a 5th-floor walk-up and a 5-year-old, and here was a man willing to burn the world to keep her. And the animal part of her, the part that had loved him in Nice, purred. Later, in the garden, he found her. "You're angry," he said. "You can't do that. Claim me like a parking space, in front of everyone." "I claimed nothing that wasn't already true." He stepped close. Are you angry, Giulia? Or are you afraid of how it made you feel? She hated him. She wanted him. Both were true. You don't own me, she said, for the second time. I know. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and his voice went soft and terrible and tender. But I'd kill for you. I think you already know that. I think it's the thing that scares you most. He kissed her temple. Sleep well, Giulia. 3 more days until the wedding. He left her in the dark garden, with the taste of him on her mouth and the lie in her chest like a swallowed knife. And 4,000 miles away, her daughter, his daughter, slept with a stuffed rabbit under a strange woman's roof, and Giulia thought, I have to tell him, or I have to run. There is no third door. She was wrong about that too. There was a third door. She just hadn't seen who was standing behind it. The third door opened on the 5th day, and it opened from the outside. Giulia had allowed herself 1 phone call to Miami per day, to Rosa on a burner phone she'd bought at the airport, kept hidden in the lining of her suitcase, used only in the locked bathroom with the water running. Every day the same ritual, Sophia's voice, small and tinny across the ocean, reporting on the coconut cookies and the cartoons and the boy at daycare who ate glue. Every day Giulia's heart cracking and mending in the space of 3 minutes. I love you more than the whole ocean, even the dog boat. On the 5th day, Rosa's voice was wrong. Giulia. The old woman never used her name. She called her Mija. The name was a warning. A man came to the bakery, asking about you, showing a photograph. The bathroom tilted. What man? What did he look like? American, or maybe not. A suit. Polite. He showed me a picture of you, an old one. You were younger, your hair was longer. And he asked if I knew you. I said no. I said many people come through. I don't know names. Rosa's voice dropped. But Giulia, Sophia was with me, in the shop. He looked at her. He looked at her a long time. And then he smiled, and he said, What a beautiful child. She has unusual eyes. And he left. Giulia gripped the sink so hard her knuckles went white. Someone had found her in Miami. Someone had traced Giulia Rossi to the bakery. And that someone had seen Sophia, had seen her eyes, the grey-green Barone eyes, and had said so deliberately as a message. We see the child. We know what the child is. Rosa, listen to me. Take Sophia to your sister's, the one in Orlando, tonight. Don't pack much. Don't tell anyone where. Use the money I left. I will call you at your sister's number in 2 days. Do you understand? Tonight, Rosa, please. Mija, what have you gotten into? Please, Rosa. I'll explain everything when I can. Just protect her. Promise me. I promise. On my mother's grave, I promise. A pause. Giulia, whoever these people are, you come home to your daughter. You hear me? Whatever it takes, that child needs her mother. I will always come back for her, always. She ended the call with shaking hands and sat down on the cold bathroom floor and tried to breathe. Someone knew. Someone had found her escape route, her hidden life, her hidden child. But who? Not Matteo. Matteo didn't know Sophia existed. He still thought Giulia had simply vanished, still hadn't finished counting backward. If Matteo had found the child, he would not have sent a stranger to smile at her in a bakery. He would have come himself, or he would have confronted Giulia. This was someone else. Someone who knew enough to threaten, and who wanted Giulia to know she was being threatened. Someone inside the family. Someone who did not want this marriage to happen. Someone who understood that a secret Barone child was the most dangerous weapon on the board. She thought of the faces at the dinner, the aunts who'd wept, the capos who wouldn't meet her eyes, Raphael Aiello banished to Catania and humiliated. Someone in that gilded room was playing a longer game than she'd understood. She went down to dinner, because to not go down would be to signal that something had changed. She sat across from Matteo and performed the willing bride and felt his eyes on her, reading her the way he read everyone, and she saw the moment he registered that something was wrong. He came to her afterward in the library, and he did not touch her, and his voice was very quiet. What happened today? Nothing. Giulia. Just her name, patient, relentless. You've had a wall around you all evening. Something frightened you. I need you to tell me what, because I cannot protect you from a thing I can't see. When she said nothing, his jaw tightened. Is it the wedding? Is it me? Has someone... His eyes darkened. Has someone threatened you? Look at me. Has someone in this family threatened you? She looked at him, and she stood at the third door, the one she hadn't seen coming, and she understood with sudden clarity that her whole strategy, say nothing, watch him, buy time, had just collapsed, because time had run out. Someone was moving against her. Someone had her daughter in their sights, 4,000 miles away, and Giulia had no power in this world anymore. No men, no guns, no name that meant anything. She had run from all of it. But he had power. He had more power than any man in Sicily. He had said it himself. There is nothing I cannot protect you from. The problem was that to unleash that power, she would have to tell him what he was protecting. And the moment she told him someone was threatening a child, her child, he would ask the only question that mattered. Whose child? She was not ready. She might never be ready. But the choice had been taken from her, the way the choice was always taken from her, and she had to decide, right now, in her father's library, whether to trust the man they called the Silence with the truth that could destroy her, or to keep lying and hope she could get to Orlando before whoever was hunting her child got there first. Matteo, she said, and her voice broke on his name. If I tell you something I've kept from you, something you're going to hate me for, she was shaking. Will you promise me? Will you promise me that no matter how angry you are, you will protect? She couldn't say it. Her. You will protect what needs protecting. Before you punish me, will you promise me that? Something changed in his face. The cold air vanished entirely, and what looked out at her was the man from the piano, alert now and afraid. She had never seen him afraid, because he had heard, in her voice, the sighs of what was coming. Giulia. He crossed the room and took her hands. His were steady, hers were not. I don't know what you're about to tell me, but I know you. I knew you before I knew your name, and I know you now, so yes, whatever it is, I promise you, on my life, on the family, on the only thing I have left that's clean, which is how I felt about you in Nice, I will protect it, and I will protect you. even from myself, if it comes to that." He brought her hands to his mouth. "Now tell me, what did you keep from me?" And Giulia Ferretti, who had run around the entire world to keep this secret, opened her mouth to give it away. "I have a daughter." The words fell into the silence of the library and lay there. Matteo went very still, not the predator's stillness, something else, the stillness of a man who has heard a sound in the dark and is trying to understand what made it. "A daughter," he repeated. "She's 5. She'll be 6 in the spring." Giulia's voice was steady now, the eerie calm of a woman jumping off a cliff. There was no going back. She might as well fall well. "I had her in Miami, alone. I named her Sophia. She has dark curls like mine." She made herself hold his eyes. "And she has grey-green eyes, a colour you almost never see, the colour of the sea before a storm." She watched him do the arithmetic she had done 6 years ago in a bathroom in Palermo. She watched him count backward from a 5-year-old's birthday through a pregnancy to a winter in Nice. She watched him remember the last morning, the grey dawn, her leaving without waking him. She watched the number land. She watched the exact instant Matteo Barone understood that he was a father. His hands, which had been holding hers, went slack. He took a step back. His face, which he had seen make dangerous men sweat, which he had seen banish a rival with a smile, had banished a rival with a smile, broke open. "A daughter." His voice was barely there. "I have a daughter. And you." The break sealed over, and something colder moved in behind it, and Giulia's blood ran cold with it. "You've known. For 6 years. You've raised my child for 6 years, and told me nothing." "Matteo, I looked for you." He said it like a man pulling a knife out of his own chest. "For 6 years. And the whole time you had my daughter, in America, under a false name, and you let me believe." He turned away from her, one hand pressed to his mouth, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, it was to the wall. "Does she know? Does she know she has a father?" "She knows her father was a man I loved. She doesn't know your name. She doesn't know any of this. Because you decided," he rounded on her, and now the fury was there, cold and vast, the fury of Il Silenzio, and she made herself stand in it. "You decided she wouldn't have a father. You decided I didn't get to know she existed. You made me a stranger to my own blood, Giulia, and you did it for 6 years, every single day, one choice after another. I did it to keep her alive." The words tore out of her. "Do you understand what would have happened if I'd stayed? I was carrying a child by a man who wasn't my fiancé. In this world. They would have killed me, or forced me to end her, or married me off and made me lie about whose she was for the rest of my life. I ran to save her. I ran to save both of us. And I didn't know who you were, Matteo. I had a first name and a face. That's all you ever gave me. How was I supposed to find just Matteo? How was I supposed to know that the boy at the piano was going to become the most dangerous man in Sicily? She was crying and furious, and she didn't care. You didn't tell me who you were either. We were both hiding. The difference is, I had to live with the consequences in my body, and you got to keep looking for a girl who was never coming back. The silence after was enormous. Matteo stared at her, chest heaving, And she watched the fury and the grief and the 6 years of searching war across his face, and she waited to find out which man he was, the one who loved her or the one they'd made him into. "Where is she now?" he said finally. Flat, controlled, terrifying. And here it was, the reason she'd broken her silence at all. She'd almost forgotten, in the detonation of the confession, why she'd lit the fuse. "That's why I had to tell you," she said. "Someone found her. Today. A man came to the bakery in Miami where I lived, and showed my old photograph, and asked about me. And then he looked at Sophia, at her eyes, and he said, 'What a beautiful child. She has unusual eyes.' And he left. Deliberately. As a message." Her voice cracked. "Someone knows about her, Matteo. Someone who isn't you. Someone who traced me to Miami and wanted me to know they'd found my daughter. And I have no power in this world anymore. I have no men, no name that means anything. I ran from all of it. So I have nothing to protect her with." She lifted her chin. "But you do. You said there was nothing you couldn't protect me from. Well, I'm not the one who needs protecting. She is. And she's yours. So I'm asking you. I'm begging you. Whatever you do to me after, protect her first." Everything changed in him at once. The grief did not vanish. She saw it bank down into something that would burn for a long time. But the fury of the betrayed lover was swept aside by something older and more elemental. And Giulia understood, watching it happen, that she had just released a force she might not be able to control. Because a wounded man is dangerous. But a father whose child is threatened is a different order of thing entirely. And she had just told Il Silenzio that someone had put their eyes on his blood. "Where?" he said, and his voice had gone quiet in the way that made men leave for Catania. "Where is she right now, this minute?" "With a woman named Rosa. I told her to take Sophia to her sister in Orlando tonight, to disappear. I am supposed to call in 2 days." Orlando. He was already moving, to the door, pulling a phone from his pocket, and she saw the transformation complete itself, saw the man from Nice and the killer they'd made fuse into a single purpose. "Give me the woman's full name, the sister's name, any address you have. I have people who can be in Orlando in 6 hours, and they will not stop until that child is behind a wall of men who would die before letting anyone near her." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet and hard and absolutely certain. "You understand me, Giulia. Whatever is between us, whatever you did, whatever I do about it, that is my daughter. And no one on this earth threatens my daughter and lives to do it twice. Now give me the names." She gave him the names. She watched him make the call, low, fast, in a dialect she half followed, giving orders that would set a machine in motion across an ocean. She watched him become, in the space of 90 seconds, the thing she had feared and the thing Sophia needed at the same time in the same body. And she understood that her mother had been right. You did not know a man until you saw what he did when the mask came off. The mask had come off, and what was underneath was not the monster she'd feared. It was a father. When he ended the call, he stood for a moment with his back to her, and she saw him shaking, finely, all over, the tremor of a man holding a great deal at bay. "Matteo." "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't to me yet. I need—" He drew a breath. I have a daughter. I found out I have a daughter and that she's in danger in the same minute. I need a moment to not." He didn't finish. When he turned around, his face was composed again, but his eyes were destroyed. "She'll be safe by morning. My men are the best in the world at this, and they'll have her before anyone else can move. I promise you that." A pause. "And then you and I are going to have a very long conversation. About the last 6 years. About every day of them." His jaw worked. "But not tonight. Tonight I'm just—" He laughed, cracked and disbelieving. "Tonight I'm just going to try to understand that somewhere in America there's a little girl with my eyes who doesn't know my name." Giulia crossed the room before she could stop herself and put her hand against his chest, over the hammering heart, and he let her, and neither of them moved. "Her name is Sophia," she whispered. "She loves the ocean and boats with dogs on them, and she drives a hard bargain over cookies, and she has your exact look, the one where she weighs you and sees straight through you. She's had it since she was a baby." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry, Matteo. I'm so sorry. I did what I thought would keep her alive. I'd do it again. But I'm sorry it cost you 6 years. He covered her hand with his. He didn't say it was all right, because it wasn't. He didn't say he forgave her, because he didn't. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But he held her hand against his heart, and he bent his head until his forehead touched hers, and in the dark of her father's library, 2 people who had loved each other under false names stood in the ruins of the truth and did not let go. The next 6 hours were the longest of Giulia's life. Matteo did not sleep, and so neither did she. They moved to a smaller sitting room, away from the family, and he made call after call, and slowly, terribly, a picture assembled itself out of the fragments his men reported back. Rosa and Sophia had made it to Orlando. That was the first blessing, delivered at 1 in the morning by a voice on a phone. The girl and the old woman reached the sisters' house. They are inside. My men have the street. Giulia had to sit down when she heard it. She'd been standing rigid for 2 hours, and her knees simply gave. But the second report at 2:30 turned the blessing sour. Someone was already watching the sisters' house, Matteo told her, setting down the phone, his face grim. My men found a car, 2 men in it, professionals, not local muscle, not police. They'd been there since before Rosa arrived, which means whoever sent them knew about the sister in Orlando before you did. He looked at her. Before you called Rosa. Do you understand what that means? Giulia's blood went cold. It means they've been listening. To me, to my calls. It means someone has had eyes on you for longer than a week. This wasn't a man stumbling onto you in Miami. This was surveillance. Patient, expensive surveillance. Someone found you a while ago and has been watching, waiting, gathering. The bakery, the child, the escape route, all of it. His jaw tightened. And they moved the moment you came back to Sicily, which tells me the trigger was your return. Someone doesn't want you here, or doesn't want this marriage, or doesn't want... He stopped. Doesn't want Sophia to exist, Giulia finished quietly. Because if the family knows there's already a Barone heir, a child of your blood, then this marriage isn't about producing one anymore. It changes the whole board. Matteo looked at her with something like respect. You still think like one of us. 6 years in America didn't wash it out. It's in the blood, apparently. She wrapped her arms around herself. Who, Matteo? Who benefits from Sophia not existing? Who benefits from me not coming home? He was quiet for a long moment, and she watched him run the same calculation she'd been running for days. The faces at the dinner, the men who wouldn't meet her eyes, the whole treacherous architecture of a dying Don's court. Your father named me his successor, Matteo said slowly. But there are men who expected it to go differently. Your father has no living sons. When Niccolo died, the natural expectation was that the Barone line and the Ferretti line would merge through marriage, and that the man who married you would inherit both. Whoever married the Ferretti daughter would become the most powerful man in Sicily. That's what the arrangement with Niccolo was before you ran. That's what it became with me. His eyes were dark. There were other candidates, men who wanted to be that. Men who thought that, with you gone and presumed dead, they might maneuver into the position themselves, marry a cousin, forge an alliance, take the whole thing by degrees. And then you came back, and your father handed it all to me, and you with it. He set his jaw. Your return didn't just restore the peace, Giulia. It ended someone's ambition. Overnight. Raphael Aiello, she said. Maybe. He wanted you, he wanted the power, and I humiliated him in front of the family. But Raphael doesn't have the reach to run surveillance in Miami for months. Someone is funding him, or using him, or it's not him at all. Matteo dragged a hand down his face. It doesn't matter yet. What matters is Sophia is safe tonight, and I need to get her somewhere no one can reach her. And I need to find out who's behind this before the wedding, because a wedding is the perfect place to move against both of us. Everyone in one room, everyone armed, old grudges and new wine. The phrase hung in the air. The perfect place to move against both of us. Her wedding. Again. The last time she'd stood at the edge of a Sicilian wedding, she'd jumped out a window. This time there was nowhere to jump to. At 4 in the morning came the third report, and this one Matteo took standing by the window, watching the sky go from black to charcoal over the olive groves, and Giulia watched his shoulders and knew before he spoke that it was bad. The 2 men outside the sister's house, he said. My people took them, quietly, and they talked. He didn't turn around. They were hired out of Palermo, Sicilian money. The instructions were to watch the child, confirm she was the one from the bakery photograph, and wait for an order. A pause. The order they were waiting for was to take her. Not hurt her, take her, alive. He finally turned, and his face was carved from stone. Someone wanted to kidnap my daughter Giulia, to use as leverage, against you or against me or against your father. A Barone child in the wrong hands is the most valuable hostage in Italy, and someone knew it before I did. Giulia's hand was over her mouth. But she's safe. You said she's safe. She's safe. My men have her. The hired men are gone, and by tonight Sophia will be on a plane to a place I own that no one else knows exists. He crossed to her and took her by the shoulders, and his grip was hard, grounding. Listen to me. She is safe. I will keep her safe if it costs me everything I have and everything I am. But I need you to understand what we're in the middle of. Someone inside this family tried to steal a child they didn't even know for certain was mine, which means they've now confirmed she is, which means the stakes just doubled, and the wedding is in 2 days. His thumbs pressed into her shoulders. So I'm going to ask you something, and I need the truth, because we are past the time for anything but the truth. Do you want to marry me? The question landed like a struck bell. What? Not because your father commands it, not for the alliance, not for the peace, not to keep me from being humiliated. His eyes searched hers. You. Do you want to marry me? Because if you don't, then we protect Sophia, and we find out who's behind this. And then you take our daughter and you disappear again, and I let you, and I spend the rest of my life knowing you're both out there somewhere, safe, hating me. I'll do it if that's what you want. God help me. I found out about her 6 hours ago, and I'd already give her up to keep her safe. His voice dropped. But if you do want it, if there's any part of you that still feels what we felt in Nice, then we do this together, as a family. And I will make Sicily bend around the three of us, or I will burn it down trying. That's the choice, Giulia. That's the only one that matters now. Giulia looked at the man they called the Silence, wet-eyed at dawn, offering to give up a daughter he'd known about for 6 hours rather than see her endangered. And she knew her answer, and it terrified her, because it was not the safe answer, and she had spent 6 years choosing the safe answer. Yes, she whispered. God help us both. Yes. She wanted to see her father before the wedding. She needed to. He was awake in the late morning, a good hour, the nurse said, one of the fewer and fewer good hours, propped up against the pillows with a little colour in his face, though the colour was a lie the disease told to keep its victims hoping. Giulia sat by the bed and took his hand, and he squeezed it with surprising strength. They tell me, he rasped, that you and Matteo have not been at each other's throats. That is good. I feared, a dry laugh, I feared you would run again, out another window. No more windows, Papa. No. His cloudy eyes found hers. You have decided to stay. I've decided to marry him. Yes. Something eased in the old man's face, relief, deep and genuine, and under it a fatigue so profound it frightened her. He had been holding on for this, she realized. His body was staying alive by force of will alone, waiting to see the succession settled, the family safe, his daughter home. Once it was done, he would let go. She was, in a sense, signing his death warrant by agreeing to the thing he wanted most. Giulia, he said, I must tell you something, before the wedding. Something I should have told you long ago. His grip tightened. About why I chose Matteo. And about the danger you are in. She went still. You know about the danger. I am dying, Piccolina. I am not blind and I am not stupid. I have been a Don for 40 years. His eyes sharpened, and for a moment she saw the man who had ruled her childhood. There are men in this family who did not want you to come home, men who had plans that your return has ruined. I know who they are. I have known for a long time. That is why I chose Matteo. He paused to breathe. It cost him. Because Matteo is the only man strong enough to protect you from them, the only one they fear. I did not choose him for the alliance, Giulia. I told the family it was for the alliance, but I chose him because I needed a wall around my daughter that no one could climb. And Il Silenzio is that wall. Giulia stared at her father, and the whole shape of the last week rearranged itself. You knew I'd come back, she said slowly. You knew that summoning the family would force me home. And you named Matteo before I got here. You set it up so that the moment I walked in the door, there'd already be a wall around me. I am a dying man arranging his affairs, a ghost of the old cunning. Did you think I would leave my only child unprotected in a nest of vipers? I have spent my last strength building you a fortress, Giulia. His name is Matteo Barone. His eyes drifted closed, then opened again with effort. And there is one more thing, the thing I most need you to hear. I'm listening, Papa. The man behind the danger, the one moving against you. His voice sank to a thread. It is not Rafael Aiello. Rafael is a fool being used. The man behind it, the man who wants the family, who wanted you dead in America so the marriage could go to his own line. He stopped, gathering himself for a last effort. It is my brother's son, your cousin, Domenico. Giulia's blood turned to ice. Domenico. Domenico Ferretti, her father's nephew, a quiet, watchful man 10 years her senior, who had run the family's legitimate businesses for 2 decades, who had always been there, at the edge of every gathering, taking notes, keeping books, so unthreatening that no one had ever thought to threaten him. The consigliere, the trusted one. She'd have named him last of anyone. He has been consigliere so long that he began to believe the family was already his, Vittorio breathed. When Niccolo died and you were gone, Domenico thought his moment had come. He moved money. He built alliances quietly, in my own house, under my own nose. He expected me to name him, or to name a weak man he could control. Instead, I named Matteo, a man Domenico cannot control, cannot corrupt, cannot frighten. And I recalled you, which meant the succession and the fortune would pass through your blood, not his. The old man's hand trembled in hers. So now Domenico must move fast, before the wedding binds it all to Matteo. He has been watching you in America for months. It was Domenico's money, Domenico's men. He wanted you dead before you could return. When that failed, he wanted the child, to control you. His eyes blazed with a father's fury from the ruin of his body. You must tell Matteo. Today. It is Domenico. Do not trust his smile. Do not trust his soft voice. He has been the snake in this family's garden for 20 years, and I was too proud and too sick to see it until it was almost too late. Giulia gripped her father's hand, her mind racing. Domenico, the consigliere, the man who would be at the wedding, at Matteo's right hand, trusted, close enough to strike. Papa, does Domenico know that you know? No. A grim satisfaction. He thinks I am a senile old man rattling toward death. He thinks I named Matteo out of foolishness. He does not know that I see him. That is your one advantage, Piccolina. He does not know he is discovered. Use it. The effort had drained him. He sank back into the pillows, grey again, the borrowed colour gone. Now go. Tell your Matteo. And Giulia. His eyes found hers one last time, and in them was everything he had never said in 22 years of her childhood. I am sorry I sold you to buy peace. I am proud that you refused to be sold, and I would give the last of my life, which is not much, to see you and your child safe and loved. Let Matteo be your wall. He is a hard man, but he loves you. I saw it the moment he looked at you. A dying man sees clearly. Let him love you, and live, Piccolina. Live for both of us. He slept. Giulia sat holding his hand until his breathing evened into the shallow rhythm of the very ill, and then she pressed her lips to his papery forehead and whispered, "Grazie, Papa, for the wall, for everything. I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago." Then she went to find Matteo and to tell him the name of the snake. Matteo received the name without visible reaction, which frightened her more than fury would have. They were in the study, their study now, she thought absurdly, the room where they'd first collided, and she told him everything her father had said. Domenico, the consigliere, the money moved, the alliances built in secret, the surveillance in Miami, the attempted kidnapping. And when she finished, Matteo simply sat for a long moment, absolutely still, and she watched him rebuild the entire map of his world with Domenico Ferretti at its rotten centre. "It fits," he said finally. "God help me, it fits perfectly. Domenico brought me half my information for 2 years. He's been my link to the Ferretti side of things since I took over. Every piece of intelligence I have about your family's affairs came filtered through him." His eyes went cold and distant. "Which means he's been feeding me exactly what he wanted me to know. For 2 years. I trusted the consigliere the way you're supposed to trust a consigliere, and he's been playing me like a fish." A muscle worked in his jaw. "He was the one who told me you were probably dead, 2 years ago, when I was still looking for you. Domenico told me he'd heard through channels that the Ferretti daughter had died abroad. I believed him. I stopped looking as hard." He laughed, a terrible sound. "He knew you were alive in Miami. He was watching you himself. And he told me you were dead. To keep me from finding you. To keep you out of the picture." The cruelty of it took Giulia's breath. Why keep me alive at all, then? Why not just have me killed years ago? Because a dead Ferretti daughter is proof of nothing, but a missing one is useful. As long as you were merely gone, the succession was frozen. No heir, no marriage, no clear line. Chaos. And chaos is where a consigliere thrives. He controls the flow. He becomes indispensable. He was never in a hurry, because every year the family drifted made him stronger. Matteo stood and went to the window. "It's only now that he needs you dead, because your father recalled you and named me, and the drift is ending. In 2 days the succession locks, so now Domenico has to act, kill you or take the child or both before the wedding makes it permanent." He turned back. "Your father is right. The wedding is when he'll move. It's his last window." "Then we cancel the wedding." "No." Matteo's voice was flat and certain. "We do the opposite. We hold the wedding exactly as planned. We let Domenico believe we suspect nothing. We let him walk into his own trap, thinking it's ours." He crossed to her and took her hands. "Giulia, I need you to trust me. And I know I have no right to ask that, given what the last week has been. But this is what I'm good at. This, the manoeuvring, the trap, the quiet violence. This is the thing they made me into. And for once, It's going to be used to protect the people I love, instead of to serve the family that broke me." His grip was firm. "Here is what we do. We proceed with every visible preparation. We smile at Domenico. We seat him at the head table. We let him think the moment is coming. And meanwhile, I move my own people into place, men Domenico doesn't know I have, men who answer only to me. And we watch him. We find out who's with him, how many, what the plan is. And when he moves, we're ready. And we take him, and it ends. Not just Domenico, the whole rotten root of it, everyone who's been plotting against you." His eyes were merciless. "I will make the wedding you were forced into 6 years ago, into the day your enemies destroy themselves. And then it will be over. And you and Sophia will never have to run again." Giulia looked at him, at the killer and the father and the man from Nice, all one person now, offering to turn her wedding into a battlefield to keep her safe. And she felt the old grandmother's blood in her, the women who loved dangerous men, and for the first time she did not feel it as a curse. "There's a problem," she said. "Sophia. If Domenico knows about her, and he does, his men were sent to take her, then he knows the child exists. And once the family learns there's already a Barone heir, everything changes. Some of them will want to protect her. Some of them will see her as a threat. And Domenico, if he's cornered, might reveal her existence just to throw the family into chaos on the one day you need it calm." Matteo nodded slowly. "Then we control the reveal. We don't let Domenico be the one to tell the family about Sophia. We tell them first, on our terms." He thought. "At the wedding, in front of everyone, I present her. No, she's not here. She's safe, and she stays safe. But I announce her. I stand up in front of the whole family, and I tell them that Giulia Ferretti and I have a daughter, born of a love that predates all their arrangements, and that she is the true heir of both bloodlines, and that anyone who threatens her threatens me." His eyes glittered. "Do you understand what that does? It makes Sophia's existence a source of Barone's strength, publicly, irreversibly, instead of a secret weakness for Domenico to exploit. It turns your greatest vulnerability into the foundation of our power. No one can use her against us if the whole world already knows and has already bent the knee." Giulia stared at him. It was audacious. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of move that had made him il silenzio, turning a knife meant for your throat into one in your hand. "You do that," she said. "Claim her, publicly, in front of every capo in Sicily, a child born out of wedlock to the runaway bride by an unknown man. You'd stand up and call her your heir." "She is my heir." His voice brooked no argument. "She's my blood and my daughter, and I have known about her for a day and a half, and I would already stand in front of God and every gun in Sicily and dare them to say a word against her." He softened, just slightly. "You gave up your whole life to keep her a secret, because a secret was the only thing that kept her alive. I'm telling you the opposite is now true. The safest thing for Sophia isn't to be hidden, it's to be known. Known to be loved and claimed and protected by the most dangerous man in Sicily. Let me be that for her, Giulia. Let me be her wall, the way your father built me to be yours." And Giulia, who had spent 6 years believing that the only safety was in the shadows, looked at the man offering to drag her daughter into the light and stand in front of her there, and began, terrifyingly, to believe him. The wedding was set for sunset the next day in the villa's great garden, under the same cypresses she'd fled 6 years before. The night before, Giulia could not sleep, and she found she did not want to be alone. She went to Matteo's rooms. He'd been given the east wing, the guest of honour, the successor, and she knocked, and he opened the door in his shirt sleeves, with a gun on the table behind him and dark circles under his eyes, and neither of them pretended to be surprised. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." He stepped back to let her in. The room was large and impersonal, the way rooms are when a dangerous man occupies them. Nothing on the surfaces, nothing that could be turned against him, everything positioned so he could see the door. But there was a photograph propped against the lamp on the desk, and she went to it before she could stop herself. It was a printout, grainy, clearly pulled from surveillance. It was Sophia. Someone had sent it to him, his own men, she realized, from the safe house, so that the father could see the daughter he'd never met. Sophia in the frame, mid-laugh, her wild curls catching the light, her storm-coloured eyes crinkled shut. Alive, safe, beautiful. "They sent it this afternoon," Matteo said quietly behind her. "So I could—" his voice caught. "So I could see her. I've looked at it maybe 400 times." He came to stand beside her, and they both looked at the little girl in the photograph. "She has your smile, when it's real, when it reaches all the way up. You had that smile in Nice. I used to try to earn it." He touched the edge of the photo with one finger, this man who touched almost nothing. "And she has everything else, apparently. My eyes, my chin, that look you keep telling me about. The weighing look. The weighing look." He almost smiled. "I do that. I know I do that. It's how I stayed alive." He looked at Giulia. "She's going to be dangerous, that girl. A Barone and a Ferretti both, with a look that sees straight through people. God help the world." "God help the boys," Giulia said, and Matteo laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and for a moment they were just two parents marvelling at their child, and the guns and the danger and the 6 years of lies fell away. Then it came back, because it always came back. "Matteo," she said, "if it goes wrong tomorrow, it won't. If it does, if Domenico is faster than we think, or has more men, or—" she made herself say it, "if something happens to you tomorrow, what happens to Sophia?" He was quiet a moment. Then he crossed to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a folded document, which he handed to her. She unfolded it. It was legal, notarized, dated that afternoon. It named Sophia Rossi, a.k.a. Sophia Barone, the document said, as his sole heir. It transferred, in the event of his death, everything. The money, the businesses, the protection of his most loyal men, all of it, into a trust controlled by Giulia until Sophia came of age. And it named guardians and safeguards and contingencies, a fortress of paper built in a single afternoon by a man preparing to possibly die for a daughter he'd never met. "I did it this afternoon," he said, "in case. Whatever happens to me, Sophia is protected. And you're protected as her mother. Even if I'm dead, my men will answer to that document, and they'll keep you both safe, and no one, not Domenico, not anyone, can touch what's hers." He watched her read it. "I know you don't trust me. I know I've had a day and a half and you've had 6 years, and the math isn't fair. But that's not a gesture, Giulia. That's the truth of where I stand. She's mine and you're mine, and I've arranged the world so that stays true whether I live or die." Giulia lowered the document. Her hands were shaking. "You've known about her for 36 hours. And I've loved you for 6 years." He said it simply, without weight, which made it heavier. "The daughter is new, the rest isn't. I stopped looking for you 2 years ago because a man I trusted told me you were dead, and I have never in my life felt anything like what I felt walking into that salon and seeing you standing by the window, alive." He stepped close. "I'm not a good man, Giulia. I want to be clear about that, because tomorrow you're going to marry me, and you should know exactly what you're marrying. I've done things that would make you afraid of me if you saw them. I'm going to do more of them tomorrow. But there are 2 people on this earth I would tear my own soul apart for. And one of them is asleep in a safe house in America, and the other one is standing in front of me, telling me she can't sleep." His hand rose to her face, that same gesture, 6 years old and brand new. "Stay. Tonight. Not for anything. I'm not asking for anything. Just stay. Let me not be alone the night before I go to war for my family. I haven't had a family to go to war for since ever. I've never had one at all." And Giulia, who had run from this world and run from this man and run from the truth for 6 years, stopped running. She stayed. She did not go to him as a bride bought and sold. She went to him as the girl from Nice who had loved a man with no last name, and he held her the way he'd held her in the winter dark, like something he could not believe he'd been given twice. And for one night, the guns and the danger and the war waited outside the door. In the grey before dawn, the same grey she'd fled him in 6 years ago, she woke and found him awake, watching her, exactly as she'd once left him sleeping. "You didn't leave," he said. There was wonder in it. "No more windows," she said. "I told you." He pulled her against his chest, and she felt his heart under her cheek, steady now, and outside the birds were starting, and the light was coming, and somewhere in America their daughter slept safe behind a wall of loyal men, and today they would either win their whole future or lose everything. "Marry me today," he murmured into her hair. "Not because your father commands it. Not for the alliance." "Then why?" "Because I want the whole world to know you're mine, before I make the whole world afraid to touch you." He kissed the top of her head. "Is that possessive?" "Terribly. Does it frighten you?" She thought about it, honestly, the way they'd promised each other only honesty now. "No," she said, surprised to find it true. "It used to. It doesn't anymore." She tipped her face up to his. "I think I stopped being afraid of you sometime around the moment you drew up a will for a child you'd never met." He kissed her, slow and certain, and outside the light kept coming and the day of the wedding began. The garden had been transformed. Thousands of candles and white flowers, a canopy of jasmine, chairs arranged in rows beneath the cypresses, and 300 of the most dangerous people in Sicily, in their finest clothes, gathered once again to watch the Ferretti daughter marry into the Barone line. The irony was not lost on Giulia, as she stood in the same bride's chamber she'd fled 6 years ago, in a different dress, simpler this time, chosen by her, ivory silk without a tiara, looking out the same window at the same garden. This time she would walk through the door. Her mother helped her dress, as before, but everything else was different. This time Maria's hands were steady, and her eyes were fierce and proud, and when she settled the simple veil, she leaned in and whispered, "Your father is being carried down. He insisted. He wants to see it. He wants to see you married, by your own choice this time, in the same place you ran from." Her voice thickened. "He will not last the week, cara, but he will last today. He is holding on to see this." "I know, Mama. And the other thing," Maria's voice dropped further. "Matteo told me the plan, about Domenico, about announcing the child." Her eyes searched her daughter's. "It is dangerous, Giulia, all of it. Are you sure?" "No," Giulia said honestly, "but I'm sure about him. That's new. 6 years ago I ran because I wasn't sure about anything. Today I walk because I'm sure about him." She took her mother's hands. "Whatever happens today, Mama, thank you. For the unlocked door, for 6 years of silence, for keeping her secret. I know what it cost you." Maria Ferretti, who was made of stone, cracked, just slightly, and pulled her daughter into her arms. "Go and be happy, my brave girl, or go and be safe if happy isn't possible. But go through the door this time. Don't make me watch that window again." Giulia laughed through tears. No windows. The ceremony was set for the moment the sun touched the sea. She walked down the aisle on the arm of a cousin, her father too weak to do it, watching instead from a wheeled chair at the front, wrapped in blankets, his eyes never leaving her. And she found Matteo waiting under the jasmine canopy, in black, still as a held breath. And when he saw her, his composure cracked, exactly as it had in the salon, the killer's mask slipping to show the man beneath. And she watched 300 dangerous people register that the new Barone Heir was looking at his bride like a man looking at the only light in a long darkness. She reached him. He took her hand. It was cold. Hers was too. Under the ceremony, under the candles and the vows, both of them were watching the crowd, and both of them knew where Domenico Ferretti sat, 3rd row, aisle, that soft, unthreatening smile, the trusted consigliere come to witness his family's future, and both of them knew that Matteo's men were threaded invisibly through the garden, waiting. The priest began. The old words in Latin, the words that had bound the women of her family to dangerous men for generations. Giulia listened to Matteo make his vows in a low, steady voice, and she made hers, and when it came time for the ring, he slid it onto her finger and held her hand a beat too long, and she understood the message in it. Whatever happens next, this is real. "I now pronounce you—" Matteo did not let the priest finish. He turned, still holding Giulia's hand, to face the assembled family, and he raised his voice, and Il Silenzio, The man they called the Silence spoke loudly enough for 300 people to hear. "Before we celebrate," he said, "I have something to tell my family, all of you, because you should hear it from me, today, and not as a rumour in the dark." The garden went quiet. Giulia's heart hammered. This was it, the reveal on their terms, the vulnerability turned to strength. 6 years ago, Matteo said, before any arrangement, before any alliance, I fell in love with a woman whose name I did not know, and she loved me, not knowing mine. We were no one to each other, just Matteo, just Giulia, and it was the only true thing in my life. His voice carried, clear and cold and absolutely commanding. That woman is now my wife, and what none of you know, what I myself did not know until this week, is that our love gave us a daughter. She is 5 years old. Her name is Sophia. She has my eyes and her mother's smile, and she is, by blood, the true heir of both the Barone and the Ferretti lines. The garden erupted in a low roar of shock. Giulia watched it ripple through the crowd, the aunts gasping, the capos leaning to each other, the whole calculus of power visibly reordering itself. And she watched Domenico Ferretti's soft smile freeze on his face, because his secret weapon, the hostage he'd sent men to steal, had just been announced to the world as beloved and claimed and heir to everything. "She is under my protection," Matteo went on, and now his voice dropped into something quiet and lethal, and the garden strained to hear it, and every man there understood that this was the real vow. "She is safe, in a place none of you will ever find, guarded by men who answer only to me. And I want to be very clear to everyone here on this day in front of my wife and my dying father-in-law and God. Any person who has moved against that child or against my wife, any person who sent men across an ocean to steal my blood," his eyes found Domenico's and held them, and Domenico's smile died completely, "will answer to me, personally, and I am not a man you want to answer to. Ask anyone here." The silence was absolute. And then Domenico Ferretti, cornered, exposed, understanding in a single terrible instant that he had been discovered, that the wedding was not his trap, but Matteo's, did the only thing a cornered snake can do. He reached inside his jacket. Giulia saw it happen as if underwater. Domenico's hand moving, the glint of metal. 300 people between him and the canopy. Her father helpless in his chair, directly in the line of fire. Matteo already moving, shoving her behind him, his own gun somehow already in his hand. And the garden that had been a wedding became, in the space of a heartbeat, exactly what she had feared 6 years ago when she jumped out the window. A battlefield. Later, Giulia would remember it in fragments, the way the mind stores things too fast and too terrible to hold whole. Domenico's gun clearing his jacket. Matteo's body slamming into hers, driving her down behind the stone altar. The crack of the first shot, not Domenico's, one of Matteo's men, positioned exactly for this, firing the instant Domenico's weapon appeared. Domenico spinning, hit in the shoulder, the gun still in his hand, discharging wild into the canopy, jasmine and white flowers exploding into the air like snow. Then chaos. Screaming. 300 people, who were themselves, many of them, armed and dangerous, diving for cover, drawing weapons, uncertain who the enemy was. Matteo's voice cutting through it all, roaring orders in dialect, and his hidden men rising up out of the crowd like the earth itself standing to fight. Men no one had marked as soldiers, waiters and guests and cousins, all of them Matteo's, all of them converging on Domenico and the handful of men who moved to defend him. Giulia's father. Vittorio in his chair, in the open, in the line of fire. She saw a man, one of Domenico's, swing a gun toward the dying Don, toward the helpless old man in the blankets, and she understood that Domenico's plan, failing, had become a plan of pure spite. If he could not have the family, he would kill its head in front of everyone. He would take Vittorio Ferretti down into the dark with him. Giulia moved before she thought. She was out from behind the altar and running, for the second time in her life, running through this garden, but this time toward the danger instead of away from it. And she reached her father's chair and threw herself over him, her body between the old man and the gun, and she heard Matteo scream her name, a sound she had never heard from him and never wanted to hear again, raw and broken and terrified. The shot came. It did not hit her. Matteo's man reached the gunman a half-second before he fired, and the bullet went into the sky, and then the gunman went down. And Giulia crouched over her father with her arms around him, and felt him trembling, and heard him whisper against her ear, "Piccolina, you foolish, brave girl, get down." And she pressed him into the blankets and shielded him with her body, and did not move. It was over in 90 seconds. It felt like an hour. When the shooting stopped, the garden was a ruin of overturned chairs and scattered flowers, and 3 men on the ground, and Domenico Ferretti was on his knees, disarmed, held by 2 of Matteo's soldiers, blood spreading from his shoulder, his soft consigliere's face twisted into something ugly and final. Matteo crossed the garden to him. He did not hurry. Il Silenzio never hurried. Behind him 300 people watched, the whole family, every capo in Sicily, witnesses to what the new Don would do. "Domenico," Matteo said quietly, "Vittorio's brother's son, the consigliere, 20 years of trust." He crouched to the man's level. "You sent men across an ocean to steal a child, my child, a little girl who has done nothing, who is 5 years old, who likes boats with dogs on them." His voice never rose, and it was the most frightening thing Giulia had ever heard. "You told me she was dead, her mother, I mean, 2 years ago. You looked me in the eye and told me the woman I loved was dead, so that I would stop looking, so that you could keep your chaos. Do you remember that?" Domenico spat blood. "You're no better than me, Silenzio. You've killed for less. Don't stand there and pretend." "I'm not pretending to be better than you," Matteo said. "I'm telling you why you're going to die. There's a difference. A man should know why." He stood. He looked at Vittorio, still cradled in Giulia's arms, and something passed between the 2 men, the dying Don and the new one, a question and an answer. Vittorio, from his chair, in a voice that found its old iron for one last moment, said, "He moved against my daughter and my grandchild in my own house. Do what must be done. But not here, not in front of, not on her wedding day." His eyes went to Giulia. "Take her inside first, both of them. My daughter should not see this. She has seen enough of our world. Matteo nodded. He gestured, and men moved to take Domenico away, out of the garden, into the dark, to the fate that awaited traitors in their world, the quiet violence that had given Matteo his name. Giulia did not watch him go. She had grown up in this world. She knew what the removal meant, and she found she did not mourn it. Domenico had sent men to steal Sophia. Whatever happened to him now, she would not lose a night's sleep. Then Matteo was crossing to her, and he dropped to his knees beside the chair, and he took her face in both his shaking hands, and for the first time since she'd known him, in Nice, in the study, through the whole impossible week, she saw him completely undone. "You ran toward it," he said. His voice cracked on every word. "There was a gun, and you ran toward it. You put your body over your father. Do you understand what I felt? Do you have any idea when I saw you run into the line of fire?" He couldn't finish. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt him trembling, this man who feared nothing. "Never, never again, do you hear me? I have spent 6 years and 36 hours becoming a man who can protect you, and you cannot throw yourself in front of guns, Giulia. I will not survive it. I am telling you, I will not." "He's my father," she whispered. "You'd have done the same for Sophia." He went still, because it was true, and they both knew it, and it was the thing that bound them, the willingness to die for their blood, the same terrible instinct in both of them. "Yes," he admitted, "I would." He kissed her forehead, her wet cheeks, her mouth. "Which is why it's unbearable to watch you do it. Now I understand what I've been asking you to live with every day, loving someone who'd run toward the gun." He laughed, broken and relieved, and half mad with the aftermath of terror. "We're going to be the death of each other, you and I." "Probably," Giulia said, and held him, in the ruined garden, among the scattered flowers, while 300 dangerous people looked away to give the new Don and his bride a moment, and her father watched from his chair with tears on his old face and something like peace. Vittorio Ferretti died 4 days later in his own bed, in the grey hour before dawn. He held on exactly long enough to see Domenico's treachery ended and the family secured under Matteo's absolute control. Long enough to see the capos, shocked into loyalty by the violence at the wedding, kneel one by one to the new Don and swear their oaths. Long enough to see his daughter married, safe, protected by the wall he'd spent his last strength building. And long enough for one more thing. On the 3rd day, when he was mostly gone, drifting in and out, he had a lucid hour in the afternoon, and he asked for Giulia and Matteo together. They came and sat on either side of the great bed, and the old man looked at them both with his cloudy eyes and gathered himself for what would be nearly his last words. "I want to see her," he said, "before I go. Sophia, my grandchild." Giulia's breath caught. "Papa, she's in America. It's not safe to—" "It's safe now," Matteo said quietly. He was looking at Vittorio, and something passed between them again, that understanding between men who had both spent their lives in violence. "Domenico is finished. His people are scattered or dead or turned. The threat is over, and a man should meet his granddaughter before he dies. He took out his phone. I can have her here in 18 hours, on my plane, guarded the entire way. She'll be safe, Giulia, I promise you. I would not risk her. You know that now." And Giulia found that she did know it, that somewhere in the last week She had come to trust this man with the only thing she had ever refused to trust anyone with, her daughter's life. "Bring her home," she said. Sophia arrived the next afternoon. Giulia met the car in the drive, the same gravel drive she'd fled down in a wedding dress. And when the door opened and her daughter tumbled out, curls wild, storm-coloured eyes enormous, shouting, "Mama!" and launching herself across the gravel, Giulia dropped to her knees and caught her, and held her so hard the child squeaked and wept into the small, warm neck, and thought, "I did it. I brought her home, and she's safe, and I didn't have to run." Matteo stood a little apart, and Giulia felt his stillness, and she understood what it was. Terror. The most dangerous man in Sicily, who had faced down guns without blinking, was frozen with fear at the prospect of meeting a 5-year-old. "Sophia," Giulia said, and turned her daughter gently around so that she faced the man standing at the edge of the drive. "There's someone I want you to meet." Sophia went quiet in the way she did when she was assessing something new. She looked at Matteo, looked at him with that weighing, considering, seeing too much look that was his own gaze given back to him. And Giulia watched the man's composure shatter silently at the sight of his own eyes in his daughter's face. Matteo came forward slowly, the way you approach a wild thing you're afraid to startle, and he knelt on the gravel so that he was at her height, and for a moment the two of them simply studied each other, the killer and the child, grey-green eyes meeting grey-green eyes. "Hello, Sophia," he said. His voice was not quite steady. "My name is Matteo." "You have my eyes," Sophia announced, with the blunt certainty of 5-year-olds. Matteo made a sound that was half laugh, half something breaking. "No," he said gently. "You have mine. I had them first." Sophia considered this. It seemed to satisfy her sense of justice. "Are you Mama's friend?" He glanced up at Giulia, and she nodded, and he looked back at his daughter, and he said the thing carefully, the way you'd diffuse something that could go off. "I'm your papa, Sophia. I've been away for a long time. I didn't know where you were, but I looked for you, and now I've found you, and I'm never going to be away again." Sophia absorbed this. Giulia held her breath. "Do you have boats?" Sophia asked. Matteo blinked. "Boats?" "With dogs on them. Mama said maybe someday I could go on a boat with a dog." And Matteo Barone, Il Silenzio, the most feared man in Sicily, said, in the gravest voice Giulia had ever heard him use, "I have several boats, and if you want a dog on one of them, then there will be a dog on one of them by tomorrow. This I promise you." He held out his hand, the hand that had done terrible things, the hand that had drawn up a will for her in a single afternoon. "Would you like to see the garden? There's a fountain with fish in it." Sophia looked at the offered hand. She looked at her mother, and then, with the sudden total trust that children give and adults spend their whole lives trying to earn back, she put her small hand in his enormous one and said, "Okay, Papa." And Matteo Barone's face did something Giulia had never seen it do, something that made her have to look away and press her hand to her own mouth. They took her upstairs to meet her grandfather. Vittorio was very weak by then, drifting. But when Sophia climbed carefully onto the edge of the great bed, shushed and solemn, understanding somehow that this was a fragile place, the old man's eyes opened and found her and filled. "Ah," he breathed, "there she is. There's the free one. The one none of them will ever be able to sell." His trembling hand found her curls. "You have your mother's smile, Piccola, and your father's eyes, and, God help us all, I think you have my stubbornness. I can see it right there in your chin." He was crying, the easy tears of the very old and the very ill. "I sold your mother once to buy peace. It was the great sin of my life. And she ran, and she made you. And now here you are, in my house, and you were made out of the one thing in this family that was ever free." His eyes drifted to Giulia. "You gave me a gift, Piccolina. At the very end, you brought the free one home. And she is loved. I can see that she is loved." He looked at Matteo, standing at the foot of the bed. "You, Silenzio, you will protect them, both of them, with everything you are." "With everything I am," Matteo said, "until I die and after, on my life." "Good." Vittorio's eyes closed. His hand stayed in Sophia's curls. "Then I can go. I have seen it. My daughter, home and free and loved. My grandchild safe. The family whole." A long breath. "It is enough. It is more than a man like me deserves. Grazie. Grazie, all of you." He slept. He died the next morning at the grey hour, with his family around him. And Giulia, who had spent 6 years believing she would never come home, who had fled this house in a wedding dress and sworn never to return, stood at her father's bedside, holding her husband's hand and her daughter's hand, and understood that she had, in the end, come home to bury the man who'd tried to sell her, and to forgive him completely, and that both things were true, and that the human heart was large enough to hold them together. The funeral was vast. Every family in Sicily sent flowers and men and respect. Matteo stood at the head of it as the new Don, and the whole underworld bent its knee. And Giulia stood beside him in black, with Sophia's hand in hers, and no one dared look at the Barone daughter with anything but reverence, because word had gone out about the wedding, about the man who'd claimed the child in front of everyone and ended the traitor who'd threatened her. The vulnerability had become the strength, exactly as Matteo had promised. That night, after the funeral, after Sophia was asleep, in her own room now, in the villa, a room Matteo had had filled with everything a 5-year-old could want, including a stuffed dog on a toy boat, Giulia stood on the terrace and looked out at the olive groves silvered in moonlight. And Matteo came and stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her, and they were quiet a long time. "He was at peace," Matteo said finally. "Your father, at the end. That's more than most men in our world get. You gave him that, bringing Sophia. You gave him that, by coming home when you could have run." He pressed his lips to her hair. "I know what it cost you. to walk back into all of this, to trust me with her. I know what that was, Giulia. She turned in his arms and looked up at him, the killer, the father, the man from Nice, all one person, all hers. "Can I ask you something?" she said, "and will you tell me the truth?" "Always. It's the only thing I have left that's clean." "Domenico, what happened to him? After the wedding, when your men took him away?" Matteo was quiet for a moment. She watched him decide how much of his world to bring into their marriage, how much darkness to let her see. "You grew up in this world," he said finally. "You know what happens to a man who sends soldiers across an ocean to steal a child. You know what our law requires." He held her eyes. "I'm not going to describe it to you, because you don't need it in your head. And because there's a part of me, the part that met you in Nice, that doesn't want you to look at these hands and think of it. But I'm not going to lie and say he's alive somewhere. He's not. He threatened Sophia. He was never going to see another sunrise. That was decided the moment his men looked at her in that bakery." A pause. "Does that frighten you?" Giulia thought about it, honestly, the way they'd promised. "No," she said. "I think it should. I think a better woman would be frightened." She reached up and touched his face. "But he sent men to take my daughter. And I find that I'm exactly as capable of darkness as you are when it comes to her. I ran toward a gun to save my father. I would do far worse than you did to Domenico to protect Sophia. So no, it doesn't frighten me." A wry, exhausted smile. "It turns out I'm my father's daughter after all. God help me." Matteo pulled her against his chest and held her, and above them the Sicilian stars wheeled slow and cold and ancient, and below them the family slept, and their daughter dreamed of boats with dogs on them, safe at last. They did not go back to Miami. There had been a moment, in the days after the funeral, when Giulia had wondered if she should, if the safe, small, invisible life she'd built might still be there, waiting, if she could take Sophia and slip back into being no one. Old habits, 6 years of running, did not undo themselves in a fortnight. But she stood one evening in the room that had been her childhood bedroom, looking out at the garden where she'd been shot at on her wedding day, and where her daughter now chased fireflies with 2 of Matteo's most fearsome soldiers reduced to laughing bodyguards, and she understood that the running was over. Not because she was trapped. Matteo had made it clear more than once that if she truly wanted to leave, he would let her go, would protect her from a distance, would break his own heart before he'd cage her. The document naming Sophia his heir had a clause. She'd read it. Should the mother wish to raise the child elsewhere, she shall have every resource and every protection, and the father shall not compel her return. He'd built her a door out. That was the thing that made her stay. He'd built her a door out and left it unlocked, the way her mother had left the wedding chamber door unlocked 6 years ago, and it turned out that an unlocked door was the only thing that could make her want to stay in the room. "You keep looking at that garden like it owes you money," Matteo said from the doorway. She smiled without turning. "I keep waiting to feel trapped, and I don't. It's strange." He came to stand beside her, and they watched their daughter shriek with delight as a firefly landed on her nose. "You're not trapped," he said. "You're the only person in my entire life who chose me." Do you understand how rare that is in our world? Everyone else was born into it, or married into it, or was conquered into it. You left. You got all the way out to America, to a life with your name changed and your tracks covered, and then you came back. And you could have run again a dozen times, and instead you married me and you stayed. That's not a trap, Giulia. That's the only free choice anyone's ever made about me. He turned to look at her. It's the thing I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. Giulia leaned into him. The truth had a price, she said quietly. That's what I keep thinking. 6 years of hiding, and then I told you about her, and it cost everything for a week. It nearly cost my father his life. It nearly cost me you when you were so angry. It cost Domenico his life. The truth is expensive. Everything real is expensive. He wrapped an arm around her. The lie was expensive too, Giulia. 6 years of it. It cost you a life in the shadows, and cost me 6 years of half living, and cost Sophia a father. The lie wasn't free. It was just paid in installments, quietly, so you didn't notice the total. He pressed his lips to her temple. The truth cost more, all at once. But it bought us this. It bought her a father and a name and a place in the world where no one can touch her. It bought you a home you don't have to run from. That's what the price bought. I'd pay it again. She thought about that for a long time, watching the fireflies. There's one more truth I have to tell you, she said. She felt him go still. 6 years of secrets had trained them both to brace at those words. When I ran from the wedding, she said, I told myself it was because I wouldn't be sold. And that was true. But it wasn't the whole reason. She turned to face him. The whole reason was you, Matteo. Not just Sophia. You. I'd spent 4 months in Nice with a man who told me to run from a life that would make me into what they needed. And then I came home, and they tried to make me into exactly that. And every time I thought about walking down that aisle, I thought about you, saying, don't let them make you into what they need. I ran because of Sophia, yes. But I found the courage to run because of you. Because for 4 months, a dangerous man with no last name had made me believe I was worth choosing for myself. Her voice caught. So when I say you gave me back my home, you did it twice. You gave me the courage to leave it, and then you made it a place I could come back to. I've never told anyone that. I never even let myself think it all the way through, because thinking about you hurt too much for 6 years. But it's the truest thing I know. You were the reason I was brave enough to run, and you're the reason I'm brave enough to stay. Matteo did not say anything for a long moment. When he did, his voice was rough. In Nice, he said, that last morning, I told you I'd burn my whole life down and start again as no one, for you, if I could. And I couldn't. There were people who depended on me, blood I couldn't spill just by wishing. He took her face in both his hands. I've thought about that 1,000 times, and I've realized I was wrong. I didn't need to burn my life down and become no one. I needed to become the most dangerous man in Sicily, so that when I finally found you again, I'd have the power to keep you. I couldn't protect you as just Matteo, but I can protect you as Matteo Barone. Everything they made me into, every terrible thing, it turns out it was all so I could stand in a garden and tell 300 armed men that they'd die before they touched my family. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. So maybe it wasn't a curse, being made into what they needed. Maybe it was the price of being able to keep you. Everything has a price, you said, even the darkness in me, and it bought your safety. I'll make my peace with it for that. Below them, Sophia caught a firefly in her cupped hands and held it up to the moonlight and laughed, and the sound rose up to the terrace, pure and bright and free, the sound of a child who had never had to run, and, if her parents had anything to say about it, never would. She'll never know, Giulia said softly, what it cost, what the truth cost, and what the lie cost before it. She'll just grow up here, safe and loved, thinking the world is a kind place. Good, said Matteo Barone, Don of 2 bloodlines, the most feared man in Sicily, watching his daughter chase the light. That's the whole point of paying the price. So she never has to. 1 year later, the wedding of Giulia Ferretti and Matteo Barone, the real one, the one they held on their first anniversary, not the blood-soaked ceremony under the cypresses, but a small, private thing on the terrace, with only family, was the happiest day of Giulia's life, and she said so, and meant it, and no one shot at anyone. Sophia was the flower girl. She took the job with the gravity she took everything, marching down the makeshift aisle, scattering jasmine petals, with the fierce concentration of a general deploying troops, her storm-coloured eyes narrowed in focus, and when she reached the end, she looked up at her father and announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I didn't drop any!" And Matteo, the most dangerous man in Sicily, had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. Maria Ferretti wept through the whole thing, and this time they were the right kind of tears. She had moved into the villa's dower wing and become, to everyone's surprise, including her own, a doting grandmother. A woman made of stone for 60 years, softening at last in the presence of a granddaughter who feared nothing and loved without calculation. "She undoes me," Maria confessed to Giulia one evening. "That child undoes me completely. I spent my whole life learning not to feel things, and she walks in and dismantles it in an afternoon." She'd shaken her head. "Your father would have loved this. Loved her. He got to meet her. I'm glad he got to meet her before the end." The year had not been without its dangers. Their world never was. There had been a challenge from a Neapolitan family, tested and put down. There had been the delicate business of consolidating 2 bloodlines under one Don, of proving to 100 wary capos that Matteo Barone was the wall the family needed. There had been nights when Matteo came home late, with a stillness on him that told Giulia he'd done something in the dark, something she didn't ask about, something that was the price of the safety they lived in. She had learned to live with that. It was the bargain of her world, the bargain her mother and grandmother had made, the bargain the women of dangerous men always made. You accepted the darkness in exchange for the fierce, total, world-ending protection. The difference, the thing that made it survivable, that made it more than her grandmother's grim endurance, was that Matteo had never once turned that darkness toward her. Never a raised hand, never a raised voice, never a threat, never a cage. He was gentle with her and with Sophia in exactly the way he was merciless with everyone else. And she had come to understand that the two things were not a contradiction, they were the same thing. He was gentle with them because he was merciless with the world. The mercilessness bought the gentleness. That was the whole architecture of him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him, on the terrace on the night of their real wedding, with Sophia asleep and the guests gone, and the Sicilian stars wheeling overhead exactly as they had a year before. "Finding out the truth, that I lied for 6 years, that I kept her from you. Do you ever, when it's late and you're angry, do you ever hold it against me?" Matteo considered the question seriously, because they had promised each other only the truth, always, and he had kept that promise for a year now, through everything. "At the start, yes," he said. "The first weeks, I'd look at her and think of everything I'd missed. Her first word, her first steps, the years I'll never get back, and I'd feel it. Not anger at you, exactly. Grief. Grief that came out sideways as anger sometimes." He took her hand. "But then I understood something. If you hadn't lied, if you'd stayed, or told them, or done anything but exactly what you did, she'd be dead, or worse. You lied because it was the only way to keep her alive in a world that would have killed her for existing. You didn't steal her from me. You saved her from a version of our world that I hadn't yet made safe. You held the line for 6 years, alone, in a foreign country, with no help and no name and no one, so that when I finally became strong enough to protect her, there'd be a her to protect." He brought her hand to his lips. "So no, I don't hold it against you. I hold it for you. It's the bravest thing anyone's ever done, and it was for our daughter, and I will be grateful for it until I die." Giulia felt the last of the old fear, the fear she'd carried for 6 years, that when he learned the truth, he would destroy her for it, finally, completely, let go. It had taken a year, but it was gone now. She trusted him. Not because she had to, because she'd watched him for a year, in the light and in the dark, and he had been, every single day, the wall her father had built and the man she'd loved in Nice, both at once. "The price of truth," she said softly. "The price of truth," he agreed, and it turns out the truth was worth every centesimo. Below them, in the sleeping villa, their daughter dreamed. In the morning there would be the family, and the business, and the dangerous, beautiful world they lived in, with its penthouses, and its nightclubs, and its guns, and its power. There would be enemies to watch, and alliances to keep, and the endless, careful work of staying alive at the top of a world where the top was the most dangerous place of all. But tonight there was only this: a man and a woman who had loved each other under false names, torn apart by a world they were both born into, reunited by a dying man's last cunning, and bound now by a truth that had cost them everything and given them everything back. Matteo pulled her against his chest, and she felt his heart beating steady under her cheek, and she thought of the girl in the wedding dress who had jumped out a window 6 years ago, running from this world, running from a name too heavy to carry, running toward a freedom she couldn't yet imagine. She had run all the way around the world, and the world, it turned out, had been round the whole time, and every mile of running had been a mile bringing her home, not to the house, not to the family, not even to the name. Home to him, to the man who had told her to run, and then spent 6 years becoming strong enough to be the place she could finally stop running to. "Say it," she murmured. "The thing you said in Nice, the last morning." He knew which thing. He'd said it 100 times in a year, and he'd say it 100,000 more. "If I could burn my whole life down and start again as no one, I would do it tonight, for you." His arms tightened. "But I don't have to anymore, because I burned it down and built it back, and this time I built it around you. You and her. Everything I am, everything I've done, everything I'll ever do, it's a wall around the two of you. That's what I am now. Not Il Silencio, not the Don." He pressed his lips to her hair. "Just yours, just Matteo, the way it was in the beginning." "Just Giulia," she whispered. "Just Giulia," he agreed. The woman with one name who hadn't decided who to be yet. He turned her in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight, the same face he'd fallen in love with across a piano in a winter that felt like another life. "Have you decided yet who to be?" Giulia Barone looked up at her husband, at the father of her child, at the dangerous gentle man who was her home, and she smiled the real smile, the one that reached all the way up, the one he'd spent 6 years and an ocean trying to find again. "Yes," she said, "I decided. I'm going to be the one who stayed." And she kissed him, under the ancient stars, in the garden she'd once fled, in the world she'd once run from. And there were no more windows to jump out of, and no more names to hide behind, and no more running left to do. She was home. She had paid the price of truth in full, and she would do it again, and again, and again. Because the truth was him, and their daughter, asleep and dreaming. And this dangerous, luminous, blood and jasmine life, held together by a man's steady heart beating under her cheek in the dark. It was the most expensive thing she had ever bought, and it was worth every centesimo.